Hello, sleepy traveller. Tuck yourself in, dim the room, and prepare for a peaceful drift through uneventful history. You can also let us know in the comments where in the world you currently are and what time it is for you. In the tangled web of medieval power, the donation of Constantine stands out like that bad haircut you can't believe you ever thought was a good idea. This infamous document, dripping with audacity, purported to be an 8th century gift from Emperor Constantine himself, generously bestowing half the Western Roman Empire to the Pope. That's right, half an empire, handed over like a regifted fruitcake, and scholars bought it for centuries. It's a testament to the power of the pen, or, in this case, quill dipped in deception. Now, before you start thinking medieval forgers were just a bunch of low-effort pranksters, let's unpack the ambition behind this scheme. The donation of Constantine was as much about political chess as it was about a creative writing exercise gone wild. It served as a papal trump card, a kind of get-out-of-jail-free card in the high-stakes Monopoly game that was medieval Europe. With it, the papacy could flex its muscles, claiming authority over secular rulers and their lands. It was the ultimate power play, and like any good bluff, it worked because people wanted to believe it. The document itself claimed to be penned, or should I say quilled, by Constantine around 35 AD, just a minor detail off by about 400 years. It outlined how the emperor, after being miraculously cured of leprosy by Pope Sylvester I, decided that a thank you card just wouldn't cut it. Instead he figured, hey, why not just give Sylvester the whole western half of the Roman Empire? You know, as one does. The kicker? Constantine supposedly moved his capital to Byzantium later, Constantinople, just to get out of the way. It's like clearing your Netflix queue by handing over the remote permanently to someone else. For centuries the document was gospel, well, not literally, but you get the idea. It was a cornerstone of papal authority, cited in countless political and ecclesiastical disputes. It was even used to justify the Pope crowning Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD. Talk about a long con. The donation was the papacy's ace in the hole, an ancient cheat code in the Game of Thrones that was medieval geopolitics. But why did it work? Why did this medieval forgery hold water for so long? You see, back then, Europe was a patchwork of fiefdoms and fragile alliances, not too different from today's tangled web of reality TV alliances. Everyone was looking for legitimacy, and the Church, eager to assert its supremacy, was only too happy to play along. Plus, medieval Europe wasn't exactly swimming in literacy or critical thinking skills. It wasn't like people could just Google, did Constantine really give away half the empire, and be done with it? The donation's unmasking didn't come until the late 15th century, when Lorenzo Valla, an Italian Catholic priest and Renaissance humanist, because everyone wore multiple hats back then, applied some good old-fashioned textual criticism. Valla pointed out linguistic anachronisms, like the use of the word fief, which didn't exist in Constantine's time. It was like finding modern slang in a Shakespearean sonnet. Valla's work was a bombshell, though it took a while to change minds because, inertia. Despite its exposure, the donation of Constantine left deep marks on history. It had already shaped centuries of church-state relations, contributing to the papacy's central role in European politics. It was a medieval masterstroke of media manipulation, a precursor to fake news, if you will. The papacy leveraged this phantom document to steer the course of nations, an influence that would make even the most seasoned spin doctor blush. In retrospect, the enduring allure of the donation of Constantine lies in its testament to human gullibility and the lengths to which people will go to justify power grabs. It's a story as old as time, the powerful doing whatever it takes to hold on to their dominion, even if it means rewriting history, or in this case, inventing it altogether. It's a reminder that in the game of power, sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the sword or the shield, but a well-crafted tale. So, next time you're scrolling through the latest hoaxes or conspiracy theories, remember the donation of Constantine. It's a historical reminder that while the mediums may change, the message remains the same. Whether it's parchment or pixels, people have always had a knack for believing the unbelievable, especially when it serves their purpose. Now, isn't that a comforting thought as you drift off to sleep? Speaking of believing the unbelievable, let's set sail to the 15th century, or at least that's what the Vinland map wanted us to think. This notorious piece of parchment claimed to be the earliest map showing part of North America drawn before Columbus ever set foot on the continent. If true, it would have been a historical game-changer, the kind of thing that would send high school history textbooks back to the printing press faster than you can say alternative facts. But much like a historical tabloid headline, the map turned out to be more fiction than fact. The Vinland map first emerged in the public eye in 1965, when Yale University announced its acquisition with fanfare that could rival a blockbuster movie premiere. Yale claimed it was a 15th century map, complete with depictions of Vinland, a mysterious land supposedly discovered by the Vikings. The idea that Norse explorers had beaten Columbus to the punch was tantalizing enough to make historians weak at the knees. I mean, who wouldn't want to upend the narrative of European exploration with a story straight out of a Viking saga? But here's where things get juicy. Almost as soon as the map was unveiled, scholars began poking at it with the enthusiasm of a detective sniffing out a lead. For years, the map had been in the hands of a Swiss antiquarian, but its provenance was murkier than a medieval ale. Critics noted that its ink contained titanium dioxide, a compound not used in inks before the 20th century. It was like finding a smartphone in King Arthur's court. Definitely anachronistic. Enter the scientists, those party poopers with their microscopes and chemical assays. By the 1970s, researchers armed with technology that would make a CSI lab blush had begun dissecting the map's materials. They found that the map's parchment was indeed medieval, but the ink? Not so much. It was a 20th century concoction, making the map a 20th century forgery, cleverly crafted to hoodwink scholars and enthusiasts alike. So why did people want to believe in the Vinland map so badly? Well, the romantic idea of Vikings, those rugged seafaring warriors discovering America before Columbus, is undeniably appealing. It's a narrative that overturns the conventional hero story and replaces it with something far more exotic and tantalizing. Plus, there was a certain appeal in the idea that the brutish yet adventurous Northmen might have had the edge over the more civilized Europeans. It's the ultimate underdog story with a horned helmet twist, but beyond the romance, there was an academic allure too. If real, the Vinland map would have rewritten the history of exploration, giving scholars new terrain to map out, theories to develop, and lectures to give. It was the kind of discovery that could make careers, the academic equivalent of discovering a lost Shakespeare play. In the world of historical scholarship, where breakthroughs are as rare as hen's teeth, the map was a siren call, too tempting to resist. And then, of course, there's the economic angle. Rare maps are worth a king's ransom. The Vinland map itself was valued at over $1 million, a hefty sum in the 1960s, equivalent to about $9 million today. When artifacts come with such price tags, the stakes are high, and the lines between fact and fiction can get a little blurry. The Vinland map was more than just a piece of parchment, it was a treasure chest, potentially filled with fame, glory, and a whole lot of cash. Yet, despite the scientific takedown, the map's allure lingered. Like any good conspiracy theory, it refused to die quietly. Some still clung to the idea that the map might be genuine, or at least based on genuine sources. After all, admitting that you've been duped isn't easy, especially when you've invested so much in the story. In the end, the Vinland map serves as a reminder of our willingness to believe in myths, particularly when they offer a tantalizing alternative to well-trodden narratives. It's a testament to the enduring power of stories, and the lengths to which people will go to make them come true, even if it means bending history until it breaks. The map, like the donation of Constantine, is a lesson in skepticism and a nod to the fact that sometimes what glitters isn't gold, it's just ink-stained parchment. As we drift away from the shores of Vinland and its dubious cartography, let's keep our eyes peeled for the next historical forgery on the horizon. After all, the truth, as they say, is out there. But so are a lot of very convincing lies. And isn't that just the perfect mix to keep our historical appetites whetted? Steering away from Vinland's foggy shores, let's unravel another intriguing tapestry of mystery and myth, the Shroud of Turin. This ancient piece of linen is like the rock star of religious relics, complete with its own entourage of believers, skeptics, and scientists armed to the teeth with testing equipment. Allegedly the burial cloth of Jesus, it's been both venerated and vilified, a symbol of faith that's had its fair share of science-based reality checks. First off, the shroud isn't just any old piece of fabric. It's a 14-foot-long linen that bears the faint image of a man with wounds resembling those of crucifixion. Now, if you squint hard enough, or perhaps have a dog in the fight, you might see the divine. But before we get too carried away, let's toss some carbon dating into this historical cocktail. Spoiler alert, the results might put a damper on the miraculous. In 1988, 3 separate labs carbon-dated tiny samples of the shroud and concluded it was made between 1260 and 1390 AD. Cue the collective gasp. This timing suggests the shroud is a medieval creation, not a contemporaneous relic of the 1st century. That's right. It seems more likely to have wrapped a 14th century Frenchman than anyone from the New Testament. Talk about a plot twist that would make even the best mystery novels look predictable. But why did this relic captivate imaginations for so long? Well, it's got all the elements of a bestseller: a mysterious image, religious significance, and a healthy dose of controversy. For centuries, people have flocked to see it, hoping for a brush with the divine. The shroud's allure is partly in its ambiguity, a Rorschach test for the faithful, where some see a miracle, others see medieval handiwork. Despite the carbon dating, believers pushed back harder than a Black Friday crowd at a sale. They argued that the samples might have been taken from a part of the cloth contaminated by a fire in the 16th century, or even medieval repairs. It's like arguing that the Mona Lisa's smile is different because someone smudged her lipstick. Plausible, but a bit of a stretch. Enter the scientists with their laboratory gadgets. In 1978, the Shroud of Turin research project STIRP had already taken a closer look, using every tool short of a magnifying glass and a deerstalker hat. They found that the image wasn't painted or printed, but rather a change in the color of the fibers. This was no easy feat to replicate, making the shroud an enigma wrapped in a linen mystery. However, the shroud's image isn't the only thing under scrutiny. Its economic and cultural impact is worth a look. Pilgrimages to see the shroud have been a boon for local economies, with believers and skeptics alike pouring in like tourists to a historical theme park. This isn't just a matter of faith, it's a matter of commerce. Relics like the shroud have historically been cash cows for churches, drawing in the faithful and the curious in droves. The shroud also serves as a fascinating case study in the battle between faith and science. It's a relic that demands belief just as much as it invites skepticism. For believers, it's a tangible connection to Jesus, a manifestation of the divine that transcends the need for scientific validation. For skeptics, it's a medieval forgery, a testament to the lengths people will go to create a narrative that serves their beliefs. Yet, the shroud's mystery endures, partly because it taps into a universal human need for connection and meaning. In a world where the tangible often trumps the spiritual, the shroud offers a bridge between the two. Its very existence poses a question we all grapple with. Can faith exist alongside facts, or are they destined to be forever at odds? In the grand tapestry of history, the Shroud of Turin is a thread that refuses to unravel neatly. It's a reminder that history is as much about interpretation as it is about facts. Like any good story, it leaves room for the imagination, inviting us to ponder the unfathomable and question the unquestionable. Whether you see it as a sacred relic or a clever medieval hoax, it remains an enduring symbol of our collective search for truth in a world that's often anything but black and white. As we weave through the tapestry of historical forgeries, let's keep our eyes peeled for the next artifact vying for our belief. After all, the line between history and myth is often as thin as the linen of the shroud itself, and the stories that emerge from that intersection are as compelling as they are confounding. So, keep your skepticism sharpened and your wits about you. There's more to uncover in this tangled web of historical intrigue. And speaking of tangled webs where truth and fiction tango like star-crossed lovers, let's mosey on over to the early 20th century, where the Piltdown Man made his grand debut on the scientific stage. Ah, the Piltdown Man, an archaeological prank so audacious it would make even the most seasoned con artist give a nod of approval. We're talking about a fossil hailed as the missing link, the supposed holy grail of human evolution, found in the quaint little village of Piltdown, England. Spoiler alert, this ancestor was as genuine as a $3 bill. The story kicks off in 1912, when a gentleman named Charles Dawson, an amateur archaeologist with a penchant for dramatic discoveries, claimed to have unearthed fragments of a cranium and jawbone from a gravel pit. Dawson, along with a few accomplices, most notably geologist Arthur Smith Woodward of the British Museum, presented their findings with the kind of fanfare usually reserved for royal announcements. The cranium, they argued, was distinctly human, while the jawbone screamed primate. A perfect evolutionary cocktail, right? Not quite. This blend of human and orangutan bones was actually a scientific chimera, meticulously crafted to dupe even the sharpest minds of the day. But why did it work? Why did the scientific community, with its legions of skeptics and cynics, buy into this bamboozle for over 40 years? Well, let's dive into the intoxicating cocktail of national pride and confirmation bias that kept this hoax afloat longer than a rubber duck in a kiddie pool. You see, the early 1900s were rife with nationalistic fervour. Britain, the reigning imperial juggernaut, was itching for a prehistoric superstar to call its own. Continental Europe had its Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons, but Britain? It was as if the island was conspicuously absent from the evolutionary guest list. Enter Piltdown Man, who conveniently filled this gap like a particularly well-timed deus ex machina. A fossil of British descent was just what the doctor ordered to bolster national pride and tweak the noses of rival nations. And then there's the ever-tempting siren song of confirmation bias. At the time, the idea of a missing link was all the rage, and the scientific community was hungry for evidence that would bridge the gap between apes and humans. The Piltdown Man, with his human cranium and ape-like jaw, seemed to fit the bill perfectly, reinforcing the evolutionary theories of the day. It was as if nature herself had handed over a neatly wrapped gift, complete with a bow and a card saying, "To science from evolution." But even the best-laid hoaxes have an expiration date. By the 1940s, scientific advances were starting to poke holes in Piltdown's story. Fluorine dating, a technique that measures the accumulation of fluorine in bones, revealed that the Piltdown fossils weren't as ancient as Dawson and company had claimed. The skull and jaw had different fluorine contents, indicating they weren't even from the same era, let alone the same creature. It was like discovering that a supposed vintage wine was actually a mix of grape juice and vinegar. Finally, in the early 1950s, a full-scale investigation using modern techniques, such as high-powered microscopes and chemical analyses, revealed the sordid truth. The jawbone was from an orangutan, the cranium from a medieval human, and the teeth? Meticulously filed down to fit the narrative. It was a forensic dissection that laid bare the audacity of the hoax, like peeling back layers of an onion to find nothing but tears and deception. So who was behind this elaborate ruse? The usual suspects include Charles Dawson himself, who might have enjoyed the limelight a bit too much, and Martin A.C. Hinton, a zoologist with a penchant for practical jokes. There's also the theory that it was a collaborative effort, a conspiracy among several scientists, each with their own motives, from professional rivalries to simple mischief. It's a whodunit with more twists than an Agatha Christie novel, and the real perpetrator remains as elusive as a shadow in the fog. The Piltdown Man saga serves as a cautionary tale for the scientific community and beyond. It's a reminder that even the most learned minds can fall prey to wishful thinking, and that the pursuit of truth requires constant vigilance and a healthy dose of skepticism. In a world where facts can be as malleable as clay, the Piltdown Man stands as a monument to the dangers of letting one's desires cloud one's judgment. But before we bid adieu to this fossilized folly, let's pause and appreciate the sheer audacity of it all. The Piltdown hoax is a testament to the power of narrative, the allure of the myth, and the human penchant for believing what we want to believe. It's a story that resonates through time, reminding us that while history may be written by the victors, it's often edited by the dreamers and the deceivers. As we leave behind the gravel pits of Piltdown, our journey through history's trickery is far from over. There's more to uncover, more myths to bust, and more truths to reveal. Stay tuned, because the next chapter promises to be just as intriguing, just as confounding, and just as human. After all, the search for truth is an adventure as old as time, and it's one that we're all still navigating, one hoax at a time. As we leave the gravel pits of Piltdown, our journey through history's trickery is far from over. there's a new player on the stage of historical hoaxes, and it's none other than the notorious Hitler diaries. These diaries promise to unveil the inner workings of one of the most reviled figures in history, but instead they delivered a journalistic blunder of epic proportions. So buckle up, because this tale takes us from the murky depths of World War II to the reckless heights of 1980s media frenzy. A whirlwind of ego, greed, and the desperate pursuit of the scoop. The saga kicks off in 1983 when the German magazine Stern announced to the world that it had acquired Adolf Hitler's personal diaries. Yes, you heard that right. Hitler's diaries, supposedly lost in the fog of war, had been miraculously unearthed. The claim was as bold as it was tantalizing, promising new insights into the mind of the man whose actions had scarred the 20th century. The price tag for these revelations? A cool 9.3 million Deutsche Marks, which translates to around 3.7 million at the time. That's no small change, even by today's standards. But the potential payoff was enormous: exclusive rights, global attention, and the chance to rewrite history, or at least to sell a whole lot of magazines. It was a gamble that Stern was willing to take, betting the farm on the allure of Hitler's supposedly intimate musings. Enter Konrad Kujau, a German forger with more bravado than a used car salesman. Kujau was the man behind the diaries, and his backstory reads like a comedy of errors. He'd been peddling fake Nazi memorabilia for years, spinning tales as elaborate as the forgeries themselves. When he offered the diaries to Stern, they bought his act hook, line, and swastika. The media frenzy was immediate and intense. News outlets across the globe scrambled to cover the story, each vying for a piece of the action. For a moment, it seemed like the world had been given a front-row seat to history. But, as with all things too good to be true, the cracks soon began to show. Skepticism started to creep in, the way a bad hangover follows a night of reckless abandon. Historians, those eternal party poopers armed with facts, began to point out inconsistencies. The handwriting was suspiciously inconsistent with known samples of Hitler's writing and the paper and ink. Modern concoctions that would have made even the most novice forger blush. It wasn't long before the truth emerged like a bad penny. Experts from the Federal Archives in Koblenz conducted forensic tests, revealing that the diaries were as authentic as a $3 bill. They were written on post-war paper using modern ink, the kind you'd find in any stationery store, not the Führer's bunker. The diaries were, in short, a complete fabrication, an elaborate ruse woven by a master forger and swallowed whole by a media machine more interested in headlines than hard facts. So why did everyone, from Stern to the wider world, fall for such an obvious hoax? The answer lies in the intoxicating mix of human nature and the relentless pursuit of the scoop. In the cutthroat world of journalism, being first often trumps being right. The allure of an exclusive, the chance to make history, or at least to sell it, clouded judgment and left skepticism at the door. But let's not forget the economic motivations. In the publishing world, a scoop of this magnitude promised a windfall. The potential profits were astronomical, and in a world where eyeballs equate to dollars, the temptation to leap before looking was overwhelming. It was a classic case of putting profit over prudence, a gamble that ended in spectacular embarrassment. The Hitler Diaries fiasco stands as a cautionary tale about the perils of valuing sensation over skepticism. It's a reminder that in the race for the next big story, the truth can become a casualty. In the end, the diaries told us nothing new about Hitler, but they revealed volumes about the nature of modern media, a beast driven by the need to captivate, sometimes at the expense of credibility. The legacy of the Hitler Diaries is a testament to our collective gullibility and the enduring power of a well-spun yarn. It's a story that resonates in today's world, where fake news and misinformation spread like wildfire. The diaries remind us that while the truth may be stranger than fiction, fiction often sells better. They highlight the importance of skepticism, the need to question, to probe, and to verify before accepting any narrative at face value. As we close the chapter on the Hitler Diaries, let's take a moment to reflect on the broader lessons of our journey through history's most infamous forgeries. From the donation of Constantine to the Vinland map, each tale offers a glimpse into the human psyche, revealing our penchant for belief, our susceptibility to deception, and our endless quest for meaning. These stories remind us that history is as much about interpretation as it is about fact, and that even the most outlandish myths can hold a kernel of truth. In a world where the line between reality and illusion is often blurred, the stories of these forgeries challenge us to sharpen our skepticism and to cherish the pursuit of truth. They invite us to question the narratives we're fed, to look beyond the surface, and to seek out the facts that lie beneath. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember, history is a tapestry of tales both told and untold, and the search for truth is a journey that never truly ends. Keep your wits about you, dear listener, and never stop asking questions. Louis XIV, a king so grand he earned the nickname the Sun King, began his reign under circumstances that were anything but sunny. You see, little Louis became king at the tender age of 4. Most kids his age were still trying to figure out how to tie their shoes, not how to keep a sprawling empire from collapsing. Imagine the royal diapers. But if you're thinking the kingdom handed him a throne and let him run wild, think again. His ascension was more like being thrown onto a roller coaster that hadn't been inspected since the Middle Ages. Born in 1638, Louis was the first son of King Louis XIII and Anne of Austria. In a twist of dynastic drama, his parents had been married for 23 years before he made his grand entrance, leading to whispers about divine intervention, or perhaps just a long string of unlucky nights. Either way, Louis was a miracle child, which added a mystical aura around him from the start. But Louis XIII's untimely death in 1643 meant little. Louis got an early start on his résumé, King of France, at just 4 years old. If you're picturing a regal toddler in a tiny crown, you're spot on. Now, let's talk about the Fronde, the rebellion that tried to turn this preschooler into a puppet. It sounds like something out of a soap opera, but in 1648, the French nobility and parliament decided they were less than thrilled with the way Louis XIII, through his ministers, had centralized power. They saw Louis XIV's minority as an opportunity to reclaim their influence. The catch? They needed to get past his mother, Anne of Austria, and her chief minister, Cardinal Mazarin, who was as slippery as a greased eel. The Fronde was a series of civil wars between 1648 and 1653, and boy did it have more twists and turns than a season finale of your favourite drama. The nobles and the Parisian parliament, known as the Parlement Paris, were like cats in a bag, united only in their disdain for Mazarin. But while they were busy quarrelling over who got to hold the strings, Anne and Mazarin kept their grip tight on the young king. The Frondeurs, those rebellious nobles and magistrates, were about as organized as a toddler's crayon drawings. They wanted power, but had no real plan beyond "down with Mazarin." In 1649, things got spicy when troops loyal to the Queen Regent laid siege to Paris itself. Because nothing says, "We've got this under control," like surrounding your capital with angry soldiers. The Frondeurs eventually got cold feet and struck a deal with the crown, ending the first phase of the rebellion, known as the Fronde of the Parlement. Spoiler alert, it wasn't the last we'd hear of these guys. From there, the Fronde of the Princes kicked off in 1650, starring none other than the Prince of Condé, a man who could boast the military prowess of a seasoned general and the political savvy of a headless chicken. Condé was initially a hero of the crown, but his ambitions for power and influence led him to switch sides more often than a caffeinated game of musical chairs. His rebellion was marked by a series of betrayals, double crosses, and enough backroom deals to make a real estate mogul blush. During this chaos, Louis's life was a mix of royal duties and playing hide-and-seek with his own safety. One moment he was at the Louvre. The next he was being whisked away to Saint-Germain-en-Laye to avoid the angry mobs. It was like a never-ending game of tag, with the stakes being the future of France. The Fronde finally fizzled out in 1653, like a firecracker that promised a bang but delivered a pathetic fizzle. Mazarin returned to France in triumph, and the rebellious nobles scattered, many into exile. The young king had seen firsthand the folly of letting nobles get too comfortable with power. His childhood amid this chaos shaped his views on authority and control. Louis XIV wasn't about to let anyone else steer the ship once he took the helm for real. By the time the Fronde was a distant memory, Louis had developed a deep-seated belief in the divine right of kings. If the heavens deemed him their chosen ruler, who was anyone else to say otherwise? This belief would later fuel his grand ambitions and his infamous penchant for absolute monarchy. After all, When your first life lessons include dodging rebellions and outsmarting ambitious nobles, it's no wonder Louis became the poster child for royal control freaks. In hindsight, the Fronde was less a full-scale revolution and more a chaotic dance of egos and ambitions that ultimately laid the groundwork for Louis's future reign. A reign that would redefine what it meant to be a king and leave a legacy as golden as the palace he would one day call home. Versailles. But that's a story for another day, and trust me, it's worth the wait. With the Fronde now a mere footnote in the annals of French history, Louis XIV had his eyes set on something grander than the petty squabbles of his youth. What better way to declare I'm in charge now than by building a palace so opulent it made the other royal residences look like fixer-uppers on a budget reality show? Enter the Palace of Versailles, a project that would become the ultimate flex of absolute monarchy. Let's dive into this architectural extravaganza that cost more than a small country's GDP. Versailles wasn't always the glitzy marble we know today. Originally, it was a humble hunting lodge built by Louis's father, Louis XIII, in 1623. But when you're a king with a penchant for the dramatic, a mere lodge simply won't do. In 1661, Louis XIV decided to transform it into a symbol of his power and taste, which meant tearing down the old and ushering in a new era of architectural magnificence. His vision? A palace so dazzling that it would eclipse the sun itself, or at least blind his guests with its sheer gaudiness. The transformation of Versailles took place over several decades, a marathon rather than a sprint. It wouldn't be completed until 1715, right around the time Louis's reign was coming to an end. But hey, when you're building a monument to your own glory, time is a mere suggestion. The cost? In today's money, estimates suggest a staggering $2 billion, though Louis quite famously avoided tallying the final bill. And who could blame him? No one likes sticker shock, especially when you're the one writing the checks. Architect Louis Levaux, landscape designer André Lenôtre, and painter Charles Lebrun formed the dream team tasked with bringing this vision to life. Together, they created a palace that was part architectural masterpiece, part theme park for the rich and famous. Think of it as Disneyland for 17th-century aristocrats, without the mouse ears but with just as much spectacle. Now, let's talk about the Hall of Mirrors, arguably the most iconic room in Versailles. This dazzling corridor features 357 mirrors reflecting the sunlight from 17 massive windows. It was here that the Treaty of Versailles would be signed in 1909, ending World War I. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Back in Louis's time, it served as the perfect backdrop for royal receptions and events, where courtiers could admire themselves while pretending to admire the king. Some things never change. But why build such an extravagant palace in the first place? Was it just a case of royal vanity? Not entirely. Louis had a cunning plan to keep his nobles close, turning Versailles into a gilded cage where they could be watched and controlled. By luring the aristocracy away from their power bases in the provinces to this lavish new court, Louis could keep an eye on them and prevent any Fronde-style rebellions from bubbling up. It was a masterclass in political manipulation, dressed up in gold leaf and fine silk. The palace's grandeur was only part of the story. Imagine the logistics of running a place like Versailles, with its 700 rooms and gardens sprawling over 2,000 acres. It was a city unto itself, requiring an army of staff to maintain. The daily operation was a spectacle in its own right, with elaborate ceremonies marking even the most mundane aspects of royal life. Louis's morning routine, known as the lever, was a public event attended by dozens of courtiers eager to witness the king's first yawn of the day. Talk about a captive audience. And then there were the parties. Oh, the parties! Versailles was ground zero for the social calendar, hosting fêtes that could rival anything Gatsby threw. Louis wasn't just throwing these shindigs for fun, though. They were strategic, a way to keep the nobility entertained and distracted from plotting against him. After all, it's hard to conspire when you're busy trying to outshine your peers on the dance floor. But while Louis was busy dazzling his court, the financial reality was less rosy. The extravagance of Versailles came with a hefty price tag, one that France could ill afford. The kingdom was already swimming in debt, thanks in part to Louis's penchant for wars, a topic we'll tackle later. The cost of maintaining Versailles only added to the fiscal burden, but Louis seemed to believe that a shiny palace could somehow make creditors disappear. Spoiler, it didn't. As grand as Versailles was, it was also a hotbed of intrigue, a place where whispers travelled faster than the speed of light. The nobles, while dazzled by the bling, were also aware of their gilded chains. The palace was both their playground and their prison, a testament to Louis's genius for political theatre. In this world, appearances were everything, and Louis was the ultimate showman. By the time the palace was fully realized, Louis had cemented his reputation as the Sun King, a ruler whose grandeur was matched only by his ambition. Versailles was the physical embodiment of his reign, spectacular, controlling, and eternally fascinating. The nobles may have been trapped in a golden cage, but Louis was the one holding the key. And as long as the mirrors in the Hall of Mirrors reflected his image, all was well in the kingdom, or so it seemed. But the story of Versailles and Louis's reign is far from over. The palace would continue to play a central role in the drama of French history, while the king's decisions would leave a mark both on his country and on his legacy. As we move forward, keep your eyes peeled for the next twists and turns in the saga of the Sun King, because if you thought Versailles was dazzling, just wait until you see what came next. And just when you thought Louis XIV couldn't possibly top the spectacle of Versailles, he decided to take his grand ambitions on a global tour. Welcome to the world of Louis's foreign policy escapades, or as I like to call it, how to lose friends and alienate kingdoms. We're diving headfirst into the War of the Spanish Succession, a conflict that was less about Spanish siestas and more about making Europe feel like a dysfunctional family reunion. You see, Louis XIV didn't just want to be the Sun King of France. Oh no, he had his sights set on a much bigger celestial body, the throne of Spain. When King Charles II of Spain, known affectionately or not as the Bewitched due to his rather unfortunate health, finally shuffled off this mortal coil in 1700, he left behind a will that read like a plot twist from a telenovela. With no heirs of his own to inherit the Spanish crown, Charles II named Louis's grandson, Philip of Anjou, as his successor. Cue the gasps from every other European power. The notion of a Bourbon double whammy, one on the French throne and another on the Spanish, was enough to send shivers down the spines of Louis's neighbours. England, the Dutch Republic, and the Holy Roman Empire weren't exactly thrilled about the idea of Louis's family monopoly over Europe. So, they did what any self-respecting coalition would do. They formed the Grand Alliance to put a stop to this Bourbon fiesta. Now, you'd think Louis might have paused to consider the implications of antagonizing nearly all of Europe. But this is Louis XIV we're talking about. Diplomacy wasn't exactly his forte. His foreign policy was more like a game of Risk, where the objective was to conquer as many territories as possible without worrying too much about the consequences. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. Enter the War of the Spanish Succession, which kicked off in 1701 and would rage on for over a decade, proving that when it comes to wars, Europe loves a good sequel. The battles sprawled across the continent, from the fields of Flanders to the plains of Italy, and even as far as the Spanish colonies in the Americas. This wasn't just a European affair, it was a global showdown, with stakes as high as Louis's ego. One of the more infamous episodes in this military misadventure was the Battle of Blenheim in 1704. Picture this. The French forces, confident and perhaps a bit cocky, facing off against the Allied troops led by the Duke of Marlborough and Prince Eugene of Savoy. It was like a clash of titans, minus the actual gods. The French were so sure of victory that they didn't even bother to scout the enemy positions properly. Big mistake. Marlborough and Eugene gave them a thumping so thorough that it sent shockwaves through the French ranks and sent Louis's reputation into a tailspin. But here's the kicker. Despite the battlefield blunders and the mounting losses, Louis refused to back down. He doubled down on his military ambitions, like a gambler convinced that the next roll of the dice would be the winning one. The cost? France was bleeding money faster than you could say, divine right of kings. The war effort drained the royal coffers to the tune of over 200 million livres, a sum that would make any accountant weep into their ledger. Meanwhile, the French populace wasn't exactly basking in the sunny glow of their king's ambitions. The war brought with it economic hardship, with taxes skyrocketing to fund Louis's military forays. The people of France were footing the bill for a war that seemed to be more about Louis's legacy than their own well-being. But hey, what's a little national bankruptcy when you're trying to rule the world, right? The war dragged on, with neither side able to claim a decisive victory. It was like a never-ending tug-of-war, with the rope fraying at both ends. By 1713, everyone was exhausted fiscally, physically, and politically. Enter the Treaty of Utrecht, the grand peace agreement that finally put an end to the madness. The treaty allowed Philip of Anjou to remain on the Spanish throne, but with a catch: he had to renounce any claim to the French crown, effectively quashing the Bourbon superstate dream. The Treaty of Utrecht marked the end of an era, not just for the war, but for Louis XIV himself. It was a humbling moment for the Sun King, whose once blazing ambitions had been dimmed by the harsh realities of diplomacy and war. The cost of his endeavours was staggering. An estimated 400,000 French soldiers and civilians lost their lives, and the kingdom's finances were in shambles. Louis's pursuit of glory had left France battered and bruised, its people weary of the endless conflict. As the dust settled, Louis XIV had to come to terms with the fact that even a king as grand as he wasn't infallible. His foreign policy escapades had been a masterclass in ambition, marked by moments of brilliance overshadowed by miscalculations and hubris. The War of the Spanish Succession was a testament to the dangers of overreaching, a cautionary tale that echoed far beyond the gilded halls of Versailles. But fear not, dear listener, for the story of Louis XIV is far from over. The Sun King still had a few tricks up his bejeweled sleeves, and the legacy of his reign would continue to shape France, and indeed the world, for generations to come. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this royal saga, where we'll explore the final years of Louis's reign and the lasting impact of his rule. After all, when you're the Sun King, the spotlight is never far away. But before we dive into the twilight of the Sun King's reign, let's swivel our gaze to the scandalous soap opera that was his personal life. You see, Louis XIV wasn't just a master of political chess. He was also an aficionado of romantic escapades that would make even the most seasoned reality TV producers blush. At the heart of it all was his marriage to Maria Theresa of Spain, a union that was less happily ever after and more strategically beneficial. Picture this. It's 1660, and the Treaty of the Pyrenees has just put the cherry on top of a long and bitter war between France and Spain. As part of the deal, Louis marries Maria Theresa, the Spanish Infanta. The marriage was like a diplomatic band-aid, aimed at healing the wounds between two powers that had been at each other's throats for years. But if you're imagining a grand romance, think again. This was less Romeo and Juliet and more the art of war. Maria Theresa was the epitome of the dutiful queen. She bore Louis 6 children, although only one survived into adulthood, Louis, le Grand Dauphin. The union was meant to solidify peace, but let's just say it was about as romantic as a tax audit. Louis, ever the multitasker, was busy juggling his responsibilities as king with a string of mistresses that would make Casanova's little black book look like a modest grocery list. One of the most notable among them was Louise de la Vallière, who was to Louis what a good plot twist is to a thriller, unexpected and captivating. Their affair lasted nearly a decade, producing 4 children. But just like a failed sitcom, their romance fizzled out, and Louise retreated to a convent, possibly seeking sanctuary from the royal soap opera. Enter Madame de Montespan, a woman whose influence over Louis was as potent as a triple espresso on a Monday morning. She became his chief mistress in the late 1660s, and their relationship was the talk of Versailles. Madame de Montespan was the definition of ambition, wielding her influence with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Together they had 7 children, all legitimized because, let's face it, when you're the king, rules are just polite suggestions. But Montespan's reign as the favourite wasn't to last. In the late 1670s, the affair of the poisons erupted, a scandal involving poisonings, witchcraft, and enough intrigue to fill an entire season of true crime. Montespan was implicated, and though she was never formally charged, the scandal tainted her standing at court. The king's attentions shifted once more, this time to Madame de Maintenon, his former governess turned mistress turned wife in secret. Talk about a career trajectory. Madame de Maintenon was a different breed altogether. She was pious, mature, and the complete opposite of the fiery Montespan. If Montespan was a fireworks display, Maintenon was a soothing cup of chamomile tea. Louis married her in a private ceremony around 1683, after the death of Maria Theresa. Although their union was never publicly acknowledged, Maintenon's influence was undeniable. She became Louis's confidant, advisor, and, some say, the power behind the throne. But the Sun King's romantic dalliances had more than just personal implications. They were an integral part of his strategy for controlling the court. By keeping the nobility focused on courtly intrigue and the spectacle of his personal life, Louis distracted them from plotting against him. It was political theatre at its finest, with Louis as the star and the courtiers as his supporting cast, forever vying for his favour in the grand production that was Versailles. And what a production it was! The court at Versailles was a marionette show, with Louis pulling the strings. Every detail, every interaction was meticulously orchestrated to reinforce his absolute authority. The nobles were required to attend daily rituals, like the lever and the coucher, where they'd witness the king's rising and retiring in lavish ceremonies that made even the simplest acts feel like a royal decree. But this micromanagement came at a cost. The constant pressure to maintain appearances and curry favour with the king created a powder keg of jealousy and resentment. The nobles, while dazzling in their finery, were trapped in a golden cage, their ambitions stifled by the very opulence they craved. In essence, Louis turned Versailles into the world's most extravagant surveillance state, where loyalty was bought with luxury and dissent was buried beneath layers of silk and brocade. Yet the king's personal choices reverberated beyond the court. Take his financial policies, for instance. Louis's penchant for lavish spending extended to his romantic life, with mistresses and illegitimate children requiring generous stipends and estates. The costs of maintaining his personal life, coupled with the expenses of Versailles and constant warfare, drained the national treasury faster than you could say fiscal responsibility. And while Louis's romantic entanglements might seem like juicy historical gossip, they had very real consequences for France. His decisions shaped the political landscape, with alliances and rivalries formed and broken in the boudoir of Versailles. The legacy of Louis's reign was as much about his personal life as his public one, a testament to the complex interplay of power, politics, and passion. So, as we peer behind the gilded curtain of Louis XIV's personal life, we find a tapestry woven with ambition, intrigue, and a fair bit of scandal. It was a world where the personal was political, and the political was deeply personal. A world where the Sun King shone brightest, even as his kingdom teetered on the brink of financial ruin. But hold on to your wigs and powdered faces, because the saga of Louis XIV is far from over. The Sun King still has a few more chapters to write in his epic story, and the shadows of his reign will linger long after the last candle in Versailles has been snuffed out. Stay tuned for more royal revelations as we continue to unravel the tangled web of Louis XIV's life and legacy, and so we march into the twilight of Louis XIV's reign, a time when the Sun King found his luminous glow dimming under the weight of his own legacy. By the time he shuffled off this mortal coil in 1705, Louis had ruled for an astonishing 72 years. That's right, folks. He was king longer than most people lived back then. He ascended the throne as a toddler, all chubby cheeks and regal potential, and left it as a battle-worn monarch whose ambitions had both elevated and exhausted France. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. What exactly did Louis leave behind? A country basking in glory, or a kingdom teetering on the edge of collapse? The answer, as with most things in history, is a bit of both. Like a cake that's half-baked, yet somehow still manages to impress at a dinner party. First, let's talk about the myth. Louis XIV, the Sun King, has been immortalized as the epitome of absolute monarchy. His reign was the blueprint for centralized power, a kind of royal dictatorship dressed up in velvet and gold. He famously declared, "L'État, c'est moi, I am the state," a phrase that perfectly encapsulates his philosophy of rule. Under Louis, the monarchy became the star of the show, with the king as the star performer and everyone else mere extras in his grand production. But peel back the layers and you'll find a reality that's not quite as glittering. Yes, Louis centralized power, but it came at a staggering cost. His wars, those expensive exercises in ambition, drained the kingdom's coffers until they were as empty as a theatre after the final curtain. By the end of his reign, France was drowning in debt, to the tune of over 2 billion livres, an eye-watering sum that made even the opulence of Versailles seem like a financial footnote. And speaking of Versailles, this palace of palaces was both a triumph and a trap. It was a dazzling symbol of Louis's power, yet it also embodied his greatest folly. The relentless focus on grandeur and spectacle masked the underlying rot, economic mismanagement, social unrest, and a nobility that seethed beneath their powdered wigs. Versailles was a gilded stage on which the king played out his fantasies, but it was also a pressure cooker ready to blow. Now, let's consider the long-term impacts of Louis's reign. The Sun King's obsession with absolute power sowed the seeds of discontent that would eventually blossom into revolution. His centralized control meant that when things went wrong, there was only one person to blame. France's peasants, who bore the brunt of heavy taxation to fund Louis's wars and lavish lifestyle, grew increasingly restless. The nobility, once powerful feudal lords, were reduced to courtiers dancing to the king's tune. This concentration of power in the hands of one man created a fragile system that needed only a spark to ignite, an inevitability that would come to pass in 1789 with the French Revolution. And yet, despite the chaos and financial ruin, Louis's reign wasn't without its achievements. He expanded France's borders, championed the arts, and left a cultural legacy that still resonates. His patronage of figures like Molière, Lully, and Le Brun turned France into a beacon of art and culture, a legacy of which the French are justifiably proud. The Académie Française, founded in 1635 but given prominence during his reign, still stands as a testament to the cultural flourishing of Louis's time. So what lessons can modern leaders glean from the Sun King's rule? For one, the perils of overreach are as real now as they were then. Louis's ambition was his greatest strength and his greatest weakness, a cautionary tale for anyone who thinks they can have it all without consequence. Power, like a double-edged sword, can cut both ways, and a leader who fails to balance ambition with responsibility risks losing both. Moreover, Louis's reign highlights the importance of adaptability. A ruler who refuses to change course, even when faced with mounting evidence of failure, is bound to encounter the proverbial iceberg. Louis's inability to pivot in his foreign policy and economic management left France vulnerable, a lesson that echoes through the corridors of power even today. And finally, the Sun King's life underscores the enduring power of narrative. Louis understood, perhaps better than anyone, the importance of controlling the story. His cultivation of the Sun King image was a masterstroke of PR, an early lesson in the power of branding. But while narratives can shape perceptions, they cannot change reality. The myth of the Sun King eventually collided with the harsh truths of economic and social unrest, a reminder that no amount of glitter can hide the cracks in the foundation. As we draw the curtain on Louis XIV's epic saga, we're left with a portrait of a man both larger than life and profoundly human. He was a king who reached for the stars, yet often found himself grounded by earthly constraints. His reign was a symphony of triumphs and tragedies, an enduring tale of complexity and contradiction. So, dear listeners, as you lay your heads down and drift off, remember the Sun King and the lessons his life still whispers to those willing to listen. History, after all, is as much about the people who lived it as the stories we tell about them. And as for Louis XIV, his story continues to shine, a brilliant cautionary beacon in the tapestry of time. As the first rays of the sun creep through the cracks in the wooden walls, you blink awake in the shared, cozy chaos of your izba, a traditional Russian peasant house. There's no private bedroom here, just a single-room log cabin where you, your family, and a couple of chickens all bunt together. Who needs personal space, right? The scent of rye bread lingers from last night's dinner, mingling with the earthy aroma of the packed dirt floor. You stretch out, careful not to disturb the snores of your sleeping siblings. The day is young, and the toils of serfdom await. Life as a 19th-century Russian serf is a mixed bag, mostly filled with hard labor and a sprinkle of existential dread. You're tied to the land by birth, bound to work for a noble landowner who, frankly, probably couldn't pick you out of a lineup. You're not alone, though. There are about 23 million serfs like you across Russia, making up a whopping 80% of the population. Think of it as a members-only club with no perks. Now, let's talk about the economic side, which is as thrilling as it sounds. Every day you get up, put on your sturdy boots, well, not boots exactly, more like foot wraps, and head to the fields. Your earnings? A big fat zero. Instead, you owe a certain number of work days to your landowner. Sounds fair if you're into that sort of thing. The cash that does come your way is often gobbled up by taxes or debts. By the way, The concept of debt was as popular then as TikTok is now. You owe your landlord not just labor but sometimes money, grain, or livestock. Meanwhile, the average serf household might earn around 10 to 15 rubles a year, but debts could easily match or surpass that. Financial security? Never heard of it. Now, if you're picturing a quaint rural life, let's just pop that bubble real quick. The myth of the idyllic peasant life is charming, sure, but the reality is more cramped than cozy. You share this isbar with your family and possibly a few extended relatives. Privacy is as common as snow in July. The diet? Let's just say, if you're a fan of variety, you're in for a disappointment. Your meals mostly consist of rye bread and cabbage soup, day in and day out. Occasionally, you might spice things up with some kasha, a kind of porridge, but don't get too excited. The political scene isn't much of a pick-me-up either. The 1861 Emancipation Reform promised to free serfs from bondage, but, like a lot of political promises, the delivery left much to be desired. You're technically free to leave the land, but unless you can magically conjure up the funds to buy your own plot, you're still stuck farming for the same landowner. It's like being told you're free to go, but finding the door locked and the key mysteriously missing. In theory, you now have rights. In practice, not so much. The reform, spearheaded by Tsar Alexander II, was a step in the right direction, but it was a tiny step on a very long road. The land you're supposed to receive, the so-called allotment, is often too small to sustain your family. You know, small details. Many serfs found themselves in debt to local communes as they scrambled to pay for the land they were supposedly given. Freedom, it seems, came at a steep price. So here you are, standing on the threshold of a new day in the 19th century. The sun is climbing higher, and you've got a full schedule of ploughing, sowing, and reaping ahead, with perhaps a brief pause to wolf down some cabbage soup. It's a life filled with hardship and routine, but also a sense of community and resilience. You might be a serf, but you're not alone. You're part of a tapestry of lives woven together in this vast, sprawling empire. And despite it all, you manage to find moments of joy and laughter in the simple things, a shared meal, a warm fire, or a good-natured jest with your fellow serfs. It's not much, but it's yours. And so, with a hearty breakfast of, you guessed it, more rye bread and cabbage soup settling in your belly, you head out to face the fields. It's time to dive into the agricultural calendar, where each month demands its own grueling tasks. Now, I know what you're imagining. Lush, sun-kissed fields, a gentle breeze, maybe a bit of frolicking. Yeah, not quite. The reality is more sweat-drenched than storybook. Let's start with the spring sowing, a season as eagerly anticipated as the latest iPhone drop. The calendar dictates your life, and you've got no choice but to heed its call. Armed with a wooden plough, the 19th century equivalent of a flip phone, you and your fellow serfs march into the fields. This plough, by the way, is more of a heavy stick dragged through the dirt than the sleek GPS-equipped models farmers use today. It's back-breaking work, and by back-breaking I mean your spine might actually file a cease and desist. This plough, known as a socker, is a rudimentary tool, a far cry from the modern machinery that would make any farmer drool today. The wooden plough is labor-intensive and requires several people to operate, usually including an ox or a horse, if you're lucky enough to have one. No horsepower? Then it's a family affair, with everyone from your grandmother to the family dog pitching in. You push, pull, and sweat under the watchful eye of the sun, which seems to be having a personal vendetta against you. And if you're thinking, well, at least the sowing season is short, think again. It stretches over weeks as you work tirelessly to plant enough rye, barley, and oats to keep everyone fed. It's a bit like preparing for a marathon that never ends. And let's not forget the weeding, because Mother Nature just loves a good prank, sprouting unwanted plants faster than you can say, I need a break. Summer brings the harvest, which sounds deceptively delightful, doesn't it? The truth is, it's an all-hands-on-deck operation that makes a day in the office look like a vacation. You wield a sickle, a tool that's both ancient and effective, slicing through stalks of grain with a rhythm that feels etched into your bones. It's a communal effort, with entire families working side by side. The whole scene is reminiscent of a concert, if concerts involved more manual labor and less dancing. The communal spirit, however, is more than just a sentimental notion. It's a necessity, thanks to the mere system. a village commune that governs the land and labor. Picture this. All the serfs in your village band together to make decisions about land distribution and duties. Sounds democratic, right? Well, only if democracy includes being constantly overruled by the wealthier peasants or the village elder. But hey, at least you're all in this together. The Mir system, while flawed, does offer a semblance of organization. It's the original form of crowdsourcing, where decisions are made collectively and everyone pitches in according to their abilities. But don't let this cozy image fool you. The Mir has its own hierarchy, and autonomy is as rare as a snowstorm in summer. Orders are orders, and you follow them, lest you find yourself out of favor, or worse, out of food. As autumn rolls around, you're back to sowing winter crops, preparing for the harsh Russian winter that looms like a plot twist in a thriller. Your body aches, your hands are calloused, and your enthusiasm for farming is about as high as a molehill. Yet, through this punishing cycle, you find small victories, like the first sprout of green that promises food for the months ahead, or the camaraderie of your fellow serfs, sharing stories and laughter amidst the toil. Now let's tackle the myth of the noble peasant, shall we? Romanticized in art and literature, this notion paints serfs as contented souls, lovingly tending to the earth with joy in their hearts and song on their lips. It's a lovely image, one that could even inspire a painting or two. But in reality, the physical toll is staggering. The grueling labor, long hours, and lack of autonomy are relentless. Your hands bear the scars of your trade, your back, the weight of your station. Sure, there's a certain rugged charm in the idea of living off the land, but the reality is as gritty as the soil under your nails. The land doesn't care about your dreams or aspirations. It demands everything from you, leaving little room for anything else. The autonomy you crave is as distant as a mirage, and the landowner's whims dictate much of your daily existence. Despite the hardships, there's a resilience that shines through. You adapt, you endure, and somehow you even manage to find joy in the simple moments, a shared joke, a warm fire, or the satisfaction of a good day's work. It's not the idyllic peasantry of legend, but it's a life of perseverance and solidarity. And as you look out over the fields, you understand that this land, harsh and demanding as it is as much a part of you as you are of it. But let's not wrap this up just yet. The story's not over. There's more to uncover, more myths to debunk, and more truths to tell about the lives of the serfs. So hang tight, because we're just getting started. Now, as much as we've dug into the earthly grind of serf life, it's time to take a step back from the fields and look at the slightly more celestial aspects of your existence. You see, while your hands are full of dirt, your heart is often full of faith. Enter the Orthodox Church, a towering presence in 19th century Russia that rivals the local landowner in influence. The church isn't just a place of worship, it's the heartbeat of the village, the spiritual GPS guiding your moral and social compass. The Russian Orthodox Church is a big deal. Think of it as the social media of the 1800s, dictating trends and influencing the masses. Its teachings seep into every corner of your life, from the way you work to how you celebrate, and even to whom you can or can't marry. With roughly 140 feast days marking the calendar, yes, you heard that right, it's a wonder any work gets done at all. These aren't just any holidays, they're holy days, complete with fasting, praying, and, of course, celebrating. Take Easter, for example, the granddaddy of Orthodox celebrations. It's more than just a day, it's a season. The festivities kick off with the solemnity of Lent, a 40-day fasting period where meat, dairy, and eggs are off the menu. Picture a Lenten table, and you'll find it looks a lot like your regular table, only with fewer options. But when Easter finally arrives, it's a full-on feast, with tables overflowing with kulich, a kind of festive bread, paska, a rich sweet cheese dish, and, if you're lucky, a little vodka to wash it down. The church bells ring out, and you join the throng of villagers in a procession around the church, candles in hand, chanting the resurrection hymn. It's a moment of pure elation, an escape from the drudgery of daily life into something transcendent. But don't get too swept away by the pageantry. The church also imposes a strict moral framework, and let's just say it's not exactly the live and let live variety. The priest, a central figure in your village, holds sway over more than just your spiritual well-being. He's the arbiter of right and wrong, a walking, talking reminder of divine authority. Got a neighbor dispute? He's the guy you see. Thinking of marrying someone from the next village over? Better check with father first. His sermons echo with warnings about the wages of sin and the virtues of obedience, both to God and to your earthly masters. This brings us to education, or the distinct lack thereof. Literacy among serfs is about as common as finding a smartphone in an archaeological dig. In the mid-19th century, literacy rates hovered around 5 to 10%. Schools, if they existed at all, were often run by the church. Education was mainly reserved for the nobility and the clergy, leaving you with little more than the ability to recognize a few icons and maybe, just maybe, sign your name. Books, if you could get your hands on one, were usually religious texts, and any ideas of upward mobility through education were more fantasy than reality. Yet, even in this educational desert, there are oases of learning. Some enterprising serfs, eager to break the cycle of ignorance, would pool resources to hire a wandering teacher or send a bright young member to the village school, if one existed. Anecdotes tell of serfs like Semenov, who taught himself to read by candlelight after a long day in the fields, driven by curiosity and a desire for something beyond the plough. These stories are the exception, though, not the rule. And while the church preaches unity and community, the reality of village life is a bit more tangled. Picture a patchwork quilt. Not the cozy kind your grandma makes, but one where every patch is fraying at the edges. The mere system I mentioned earlier is supposed to be the glue holding everything together, a collective effort to manage land and labor. But within this commune, there's a pecking order as rigid as a Russian winter. Wealthier peasants, those with more land or livestock, wield influence like a club at a piñata party. Decisions about land distribution, communal projects, and even who gets to borrow the village ox are often in their hands. And let's not forget the village elder, a role often passed down like a family heirloom, whose word can be as final as the Tsar's decree. It's a delicate dance of power and politics, and you, dear serf, are just trying not to get your toes stepped on. Not all is harmonious in this communal life. Tensions bubble under the surface, whether it's a dispute over land boundaries or the whispered disapproval of a marriage not sanctioned by tradition. The village might sing hymns together on Sunday, but come Monday, it's every serf for himself. You can find accounts of serfs like Pyotr, who felt the sting of communal decisions when his request to expand his plot of land was shot down by wealthier neighbors who feared losing their own slice of the pie. These tales of intra-village strife remind us that even in a community, individuals often fend for themselves. Despite these tensions, the village remains a lifeline. When the harvest is poor, it's the community's shared granary that sees you through the winter. When illness strikes, it's the herbal remedies passed down through generations that offer some relief. And when it's time to celebrate, be it a wedding or a christening, it's the villagers who gather to dance, drink, and momentarily forget the burdens that bind them. So, while serfdom is often romanticized as a world of simple joys and rustic charm, the reality is as complex and layered as a Russian nesting doll. The church looms large, offering both solace and stricture. Education is a distant dream, kept alive by the few who dare to reach for it. And the village, with its blend of unity and discord, provides a stage where the drama of daily life plays out. The layers of serf life are rich, textured, and often contradictory. As we peel back these layers, we see a world that's neither the pastoral paradise nor the pit of despair it's often made out to be. It's a world where faith, community, and the relentless grind of survival come together in a tapestry of human experience. And as we delve deeper into this world, there's still much to uncover, many myths to debunk, and countless stories to tell. So hold on to your foot wraps, because this journey through the past is far from over. So, as we dive headfirst into the legal quagmire that was the life of a 19th century Russian serf, you might want to fasten your mental seatbelt. The intricacies of serfdom's legal framework are as tangled as a ball of yarn after a cat's had its fun. But fear not, because we're here to unravel it together, one thread at a time. First things first, let's talk about the legal status of serfs before the Emancipation Manifesto of 1861. Picture yourself as a serf back then, and you're not so much an individual as you are an appendage of the land. Your identity is tied to the estate, and your rights are about as extensive as a vegan menu at a steakhouse. Essentially, your property technically belonging to the landowner, who can decide your fate with the flick of a quill. If your landlord decides to sell the estate, you're part of the package deal, like the obligatory side salad that comes with an entree. The Emancipation Manifesto, issued by Tsar Alexander II, was supposed to change all that. On paper, it declared that serfs were freed from the chains of bondage, but as you might have guessed, the reality was more freedom with a catch. Enter the concept of redemption payments, which sounds like it should come with a catchy jingle. Here's the deal. Serfs were granted land, but with the oh-so-generous condition that they had to pay for it. Over a span of 49 years, no less, it's like being given a car for free, only to find out you've got a mortgage on the wheels, the seats, and maybe even the cup holders. Let's break down the redemption payments a bit. The government paid the landowners for the land that was then given to the serfs. The serfs, in turn, had to pay back the state in installments. The average payment was about 6 rubles per desiatina, roughly 2.7 acres, which might not sound like much, but remember, the average annual income was about 10 to 15 rubles. So, while you're technically free, you're also knee-deep in debt, with the state acting like a landlord with a particularly long lease agreement. The power dynamics were just as convoluted. The landowners, while no longer your legal masters, still held significant sway. They retained the best parts of their estates and were often the ones setting the terms for the redemption payments. If you think that sounds a bit like letting the fox guard the henhouse, you're not alone. The state, meanwhile, played the role of the benevolent dictator, maintaining control through the commune system. The mir, or village community, was responsible for collecting those redemption payments. It's a bit like having the local PTA in charge of your mortgage. And where does the church fit into all this? Well, if the state is the head honcho and the landowner is the middle manager, the church is the HR department offering moral guidance, but also keeping you in check. The church's teachings reinforce the idea of obedience and duty, making sure you're remembered who's boss, both in heaven and on earth. Now, let's take a detour through the bureaucratic wonderland that was the Russian legal system. To gain any form of freedom or rights, you'd need to navigate processes more labyrinthine than a tax code. Want to lodge a complaint against your overlord? Prepare to fill out enough paperwork to deforest a small country. Seeking permission to marry someone from a neighboring village? That'll require the approval of your local priest, the mir, and possibly a séance with the local wise woman, just for good measure. The absurdities of the system were almost comical. Serfs could petition for redress of grievances, but only through their landowner. Yes, you heard that right. The person you're complaining about is your only ticket to making that complaint. It's like asking a fox to referee a chicken fight. The layers of bureaucracy were designed to keep you in your place, ensuring that any attempt to rise above your station was met with enough red tape to gift-wrap a cathedral. This legal quagmire wasn't just a Russian specialty either. Serfdom's tangled web of rights and restrictions echoed the feudal systems of medieval Europe, though Russia managed to keep the tradition alive well into the modern age. While your counterparts in Western Europe were enjoying the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, Russian serfs were still ploughing fields under a system that could have been invented by Kafka. Despite the chaos, some serfs did manage to navigate this bureaucratic minefield. Take the case of Ivan Suzanin, a serf who became a local hero during the time of troubles in the early 17th century. Legends say he misled Polish troops away from the future Tsar, Mikhail Romanov, at the cost of his own life. His story, though romanticized, highlights the potential for individual agency even within a system designed to suppress it. As we look at the legacy of serfdom, it's clear that the Emancipation Manifesto was a landmark moment, but one fraught with caveats. The promise of freedom was real, but the execution was mired in complexity, debt, and an ever-present hierarchy. The layers of control state, church, and landowner ensured that while the chains of serfdom were loosened, they were never truly broken. And so, the tapestry of serf life continues, rich with contradictions and complexities. The story of the serfs is one of resilience and struggle, a testament to human endurance amidst a system as unforgiving as the Russian winter. As we peel back more layers, there's still much to uncover, many myths to debunk, and countless stories to tell. So, keep those foot wraps snug, because this journey through the annals of history is far from over. The curious case of serfdom's demise, a classic be careful what you wish for scenario if ever there was one. In 1861, the Emancipation Manifesto was like the ultimate plot twist in a Russian novel. freeing about 23 million serfs and leaving landowners scrambling to figure out how to manage without their essentially unpaid workforce. But freedom, as it turns out, came with a user manual written in hieroglyphs. Let's talk numbers. Post-emancipation, around 80% of the newly freed serfs remained in rural areas, tied to the land through redemption payments and communal obligations. It's a bit like telling someone they're free to leave the party, only to discover the door's been replaced with a brick wall. The Mir system, that village commune we love to critique, was still chugging along, albeit with a slightly different engine. The communal land was redistributed among the serfs, but the plots were often too small to be economically viable. Picture a farmer trying to grow enough crops to feed a family on what amounts to a postage stamp of land. Spoiler alert, it didn't quite work out. Economic adjustments were as smooth as a bumpy dirt road. With limited land and resources, many serfs found themselves in a financial quagmire. The average serf had to pay about 6 rubles per desiatina for land they were supposedly given, while still eking out a living. Let's just say that math wasn't in their favour. They had the freedom to move, sure, but without the funds, it was like having a first-class ticket to nowhere. However, over the next few decades, some did manage to break free from this agrarian treadmill. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a significant migration to urban areas began. Between 1861 and 1914, the urban population in Russia tripled, growing from about 7 million to over 21 million. Cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg became bustling hubs of opportunity, or at least the promise of it. For many former serfs, the allure of city life was irresistible. It was a chance to swap the endless fields for factory floors, where the days were no less grueling, but offered the novel concept of a regular wage. And let's not forget the cultural shift, a chance to experience the burgeoning art scene, a vibrant mix of ideas, and perhaps even a taste of anonymity. But before you picture a mass exodus of jubilant serfs tossing their foot wraps into the air like graduation caps, remember that city life came with its own set of brutal realities. The factory jobs were often low-paying, with long hours and conditions that would make a sweatshop look swanky. Housing was cramped and unsanitary, with entire families crammed into single rooms. Yet, for many, it was a step up from the relentless grind of serfdom. They traded the countryside's predictable misery for the city's chaotic hustle, hoping to carve out a better life. As for the countryside, it was a mixed bag. Some villages thrived, adapting to new agricultural techniques and diversifying their crops. Others withered, trapped in a cycle of debt and dwindling resources. The communal land arrangement, while providing a safety net, often stifled innovation. It was hard to invest in new farming methods when your plot could be reassigned next season. Still, some enterprising individuals found ways to succeed, proving that even the most rigid systems have cracks for the determined to slip through. Fast forward to modern Russia, and the echoes of serfdom still rumble beneath the surface. Stereotypes of the simple, noble peasant linger like an old wives' tale, romanticized in literature and art. The notion of the hard-working, stoic Russian peasant remains a cultural touchstone, despite being about as accurate as a fairy tale. In reality, the descendants of serfs are as diverse and complex as any population, their stories woven into the fabric of modern Russian society. But let's not gloss over the darker legacies. The hierarchical mindset and deep-seated inequalities of serfdom left scars that took generations to heal. The rigid class structure, reinforced over centuries, didn't just vanish overnight. It seeped into the social consciousness like a stubborn stain, influencing attitudes towards authority, land ownership, and economic mobility. As we wrap up this whirlwind tour of serfdom, it's crucial to challenge the simplistic narratives that often dominate historical discussions. Serfs weren't just passive victims of a cruel system, they were individuals with agency, dreams, and resilience. Their stories, while steeped in hardship, are also tales of perseverance, adaptability, and the enduring human spirit. It's easy to reduce history to numbers and dates, but behind every statistic is a tapestry of human experiences that defy easy categorization. So, as you tuck this history lesson under your pillow, remember the serfs as more than footnotes in a dusty textbook. They were the backbone of an empire, the unsung heroes and heroines of a complex narrative that shaped a nation. And while their world was as challenging and unforgiving as the Russian winter, it was also rich with stories of hope and humanity. In the end, the legacy of serfdom is a reminder that history, much like life, is neither black nor white. It's a vivid mosaic of struggles and triumphs, waiting to be appreciated in all its nuanced glory. Your eyes flicker open to the rustling sounds of fabric and the low murmur of voices. The sun hasn't fully climbed above the horizon yet, but in your 12th century Mongol caravan, the day starts early. You're lying inside a gur, a portable tent that's more like a mobile home than any flimsy camping gear you're used to. Forget those rickety pop-up tents that collapse with a gust of wind. These gurs, or yurts as they're sometimes called, are engineering marvels. They've been designed to withstand the brutal winds of the Eurasian steppes and the temperature swings that would make a modern thermostat break out in a cold sweat. The gur is a masterclass in practicality, with a wooden frame that's collapsible and felt walls that keep the warmth in and the cold out. You won't find a single tent peg, because these bad boys are held down by sheer weight and some strategically placed ropes. Each one can be broken down and packed up in less than an hour, perfect for a people whose middle name might as well have been Mobility. And it's not some cramped little space either. Even with a family and their worldly goods, there's room to breathe. It's like IKEA furniture, compact, functional, and surprisingly spacious given its modest exterior. But unlike your favorite Swedish flat pack, you won't lose your mind trying to assemble it. Now, you might be tempted to think of the Mongols as marauding hordes galloping across the plains, pillaging everything in sight. But here's a twist. They were also logistical geniuses. Let's face it, you don't conquer the largest contiguous empire in history by just being a brute. You do it by mastering the art of the move. The Mongols were the OGs of the road trip. Only instead of a minivan, they had horse-drawn carts filled with everything they needed to survive on the move. Their entire society was designed around the concept of mobility, from household items to military tactics. The gurs were just the tip of the iceberg. The morning routine in your caravan is all about efficiency. There's no time for a leisurely breakfast. You might get a bowl of air egg, a fermented mare's milk drink that's a bit like yogurt crossed with a light beer. It's rich in fat and protein, because when you're living on the go, those calories are your best friend. The Mongols were pastoralists, which means their diet was heavy on meat and dairy. Vegetables? Not so much. Let's just say if you were counting carbs, you'd be out of luck. As you sip your morning air egg, you can hear the chatter of the other caravan members. The Mongols were a tight-knit community, and everyone had a role to play. Whether you were tending to the animals or packing up the gurs, there was no room for slackers. The caravan's success depended on everyone pulling their weight, and in this society, being a team player was as crucial as having a good horse. And speaking of horses, these animals were the backbone of Mongol life. It's no exaggeration to say that without them, the Mongol Empire wouldn't have existed. Each Mongol warrior had several horses, which they rotated to keep fresh mounts at the ready. They weren't just transportation, they were companions, status symbols, and sometimes even a source of food when times got tough. The bond between a Mongol and their horse was strong enough to make even the most devoted dog lover jealous. The pace of caravan life is dictated by the needs of the animals as much as the people. After all, you can't exactly pop into a gas station when your horse runs out of fuel. Grazing spots and water sources determine the route, and everyone knows the best places after generations of nomadic living have passed down the knowledge. It's a balancing act between human needs and the necessities of the livestock that sustain them. As the sun climbs higher, the caravan prepares to move. The gears are broken down with practiced ease, and the animals are rounded up. There's a sense of purpose in the air, a collective energy that comes from knowing exactly what needs to be done. It's not glamorous, but it's effective, and the Mongols were nothing if not efficient. Their ability to move entire communities across vast distances with speed and coordination was like a well-oiled machine long before machines were even a thing. The myth of the Mongols as mere marauders glosses over the innovation and adaptability that made them a powerhouse. Sure, they were fierce warriors, but they were also savvy strategists, keen traders, and adept diplomats. Their success lay in their ability to adapt to the challenges of their environment, and the caravan lifestyle was a testament to that. They were the original masters of survival, long before reality TV turned it into a game show. As you prepare to join the day's journey, you realize that life in a Mongol caravan is all about balance. It's a dance between the harsh realities of nomadic existence and the ingenious solutions that make it possible. In a world where change is the only constant, the Mongols thrived by embracing it, turning mobility into an art form and survival into a science. And as you set off, you can't help but feel a little bit of that spirit. The restless, relentless drive to keep moving forward no matter what. As the dust settles behind you, the caravan snakes its way across the endless steppe, and you start to realize this isn't just a haphazard collection of wanderers. It's more like a traveling bazaar, a medieval version of Amazon on horseback. Forget the marauding horde stereotype. The Mongols were shrewd traders, practically turning the Silk Road into their own personal superhighway. You've heard of location, location, location? Well, the Mongols nailed it. Their empire was the ultimate crossroads for commerce, stretching from the Pacific to the doorstep of Europe. Trade wasn't just an afterthought for these nomads, it was the beating heart of their economy. The goods exchanged in these caravans were diverse and exotic, ranging from silk and spices to horses and falcons. And let's not forget the most precious commodity of all, information. News and ideas travelled alongside these goods, creating a cultural exchange that made the caravan routes pulse with life. Picture this. A single Mongol caravan could cover over 2,500 miles. That's like walking from New York to Los Angeles and back again, without the luxury of a comfy pair of Nikes. Now, you might think that traversing such distances would be a logistical nightmare, but the Mongols had it down to a science. They operated like a well-oiled machine, with stopovers planned at oases that served as pit stops for both people and their four-legged companions. Take, for example, the bustling market of Samarkand. It wasn't just a mirage of riches, it was a crucial hub where caravans could rest, resupply, and trade. Samarkand was, to the Silk Road, what Times Square is to New York City, a pulsating center of commerce and culture. Silk was a hot-ticket item, no doubt. Highly sought after in Europe, the demand for this luxurious fabric was insatiable. It wasn't just about fashion, silk was a status symbol, a way to flaunt one's wealth and sophistication. And the Mongols? They were the ultimate silk dealers, the middlemen who facilitated this east-west exchange. But silk wasn't the only star of the show. Spices like cinnamon and pepper were also on the menu, adding flavor to both food and life. These spices were worth their weight in gold, literally. In some parts of medieval Europe, pepper could be used to pay rent. Imagine telling your landlord you're going to pay this month's rent with a sack of cinnamon. Yeah, good luck with that. But it wasn't just about exotic luxuries. Everyday items like cotton, wool, and grain were also part of the trade network. The Mongols knew that a successful economy needed a balance of necessities and niceties. The real magic, though, was in their diplomatic savvy. The Mongols had a knack for turning potential foes into trade partners, making alliances that were as valuable as any commodity. Their ability to broker deals and navigate complex political landscapes was nothing short of genius. One of the most fascinating aspects of this trade network was the yam system, the Mongol Empire's version of a postal service. Picture a relay race across thousands of miles, with riders dashing from one station to the next, carrying messages and parcels. This system allowed for rapid communication across vast distances, a feat that was centuries ahead of its time. Not only did it facilitate trade, but it also helped maintain the coherence of the sprawling Mongol Empire. It was the medieval equivalent of email, minus the spam and cat memes. The Mongols have often been painted as ruthless conquerors, but the truth is far more nuanced. They were also cultural conduits, bringing together diverse peoples and fostering an exchange of ideas and technology. Their ability to integrate and adapt was one of their greatest strengths, allowing them to thrive in a world where change was the only constant. They were less about conquering in the traditional sense, and more about incorporating and leveraging what they encountered. So, as you bounce along in this caravan, it's clear that the story of the Mongols is not just one of conquest, but of commerce. The stereotype of the Mongol horde as a purely destructive force misses the bigger picture. They were innovators, diplomats, and traders, weaving a web of connections that stretched across continents. Their legacy is a testament to the power of trade and diplomacy in shaping history. And as the caravan rolls on, you can't help but marvel at the intricate dance of commerce and culture that defined the Mongol Empire. It's a story that reminds us that history is rarely as simple as it seems, and that even the most fearsome warriors can also be the most astute merchants. As you bounce along in this caravan, the story of the Mongols unfolds like a tapestry woven with threads of commerce and conquest. But as noon approaches, the focus shifts from the road to the communal gathering spot where the caravan pauses for a midday meal. Now, forget the solitary lunch breaks of the modern workday. This is a social spectacle with all the pomp and circumstance of a medieval power lunch. In the Mongol world, lunch isn't just about refueling. It's a full-blown social and political affair. Imagine a picnic that doubles as a board meeting, minus the PowerPoint slides but with extra fermented mare's milk. Meals are where alliances are forged, disputes are settled, and strategies are hatched. The Mongols knew the power of breaking bread, or in their case, sharing a bowl of fermented dairy, with friends and foes alike. This was the original social network, a Facebook with fewer cat memes and more horse milk. The menu is surprisingly diverse for a bunch of nomads galloping across the steppe. Sure, meat and dairy take center stage, but there's more to it than that. Let's dig into what's on offer. Airag, that fermented mare's milk, is a staple, of course. It's not just a drink, it's a lifestyle. Packed with calories and a probiotic punch that would make your Greek yogurt blush, it's both a beverage and a badge of cultural identity. But wait, there's more. The Mongols also had a penchant for dried meats. Think of it as medieval beef jerky, but with a Mongolian twist. It was practical, portable, and packed a protein punch. And for those with a taste for something a bit more exotic, there were wild onions and garlic, adding a zing to meals that could rival a Michelin star dish, if Michelin stars were a thing back then. One of the most interesting aspects of Mongol cuisine is its adaptability. While feasting on a diet that seems to scream carnivore, they also had a talent for incorporating locally available ingredients as their empire expanded. Whether it was borrowing spices from Persia or noodles from China, the Mongols were culinary chameleons, blending flavors to create a fusion cuisine long before that became a trendy term. So, what's for lunch today? Imagine a spread that includes roasted lamb, seasoned with salt and wild herbs, alongside fresh cheese curds. And let's not forget the broth, a hearty concoction of boiled meat and bone, rich in nutrients and flavor. It's a meal designed to fuel the body and fortify the spirit, perfect for a people constantly on the move. But the real magic happens not on the plate, but around it. As you gather with the caravan, it's clear that this is more than just a break for sustenance. It's a cultural ritual. Meals are communal, eaten from shared bowls and plates, fostering a sense of unity and equality. This isn't the time for formality, rank and status. Take a back seat as everyone digs in together. It's democracy in action, Mongol style. This communal dining experience serves another purpose. It's a brilliant tool for diplomacy. Inviting someone to share a meal is the Mongol equivalent of extending an olive branch, or perhaps a lamb shank. It's a gesture of goodwill, a way to break down barriers and build bridges. And when you're trying to manage an empire that spans continents, those bridges are essential. In this setting, the power dynamics are fascinating. The host, usually a leader or chieftain, has the opportunity to showcase their generosity and hospitality. It's a chance to impress allies and intimidate rivals, all with a well-cooked meal. And as for the guests, they get to observe their host in action, gauging their strength and intentions. It's a delicate dance of politics and palate, where every bite is loaded with meaning. In this world, the saying, "You are what you eat," takes on a whole new significance. Eating together isn't just about survival, it's about social cohesion and political savvy. The Mongols understood that the quickest way to a person's loyalty was through their stomach, and they wielded this knowledge with the precision of a master strategist. Of course, amidst the camaraderie and diplomacy, there's always room for a little bit of myth-busting. The romantic notion of the Mongols as simple, meat and milk-loving nomads doesn't quite capture the full picture. Their diet was not only varied, but also sophisticated in its simplicity. They were keenly aware of the nutritional needs of their lifestyle and made sure their meals provided the necessary energy and nutrients. It's a testament to their ingenuity and adaptability, qualities that serve them well in both war and peace. As the meal winds down and the caravan prepares to move on, you can't help but marvel at the intricate dance of social and political maneuvering that takes place over lunch. It's a reminder that while the Mongols were fierce warriors, they were also shrewd diplomats and savvy social operators. The story of the Mongol meal is one of fellowship and finesse, a blend of sustenance and strategy that fueled both body and empire. And so, as the caravan resumes its journey across the steppe, the echoes of laughter and conversation linger in the air, a testament to the power of the shared meal. It's a tradition that transcends time, reminding us that sometimes the most profound connections are forged, not with words, but with a simple act of sharing. As the caravan rolls on, the bonds strengthened over lunch create an invisible web of alliances and friendships, weaving through the vast expanse of the Mongol Empire. In the world of the Mongols, a meal is more than just a break in the day. It's a cornerstone of community, a linchpin of loyalty, and a testament to the power of the collective over the individual. As you continue on this journey, it becomes clear that the Mongol caravan is not just a moving settlement, but a living, breathing entity held together by food, fellowship, and the shared pursuit of a common goal. As the caravan continues its relentless march across the steppe, the afternoon sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the landscape. There's a rhythm to the journey now, a sense of purpose that carries the caravan forward. But beneath this outward simplicity lies a complex tapestry of roles and hierarchies, a mobile society as intricate as the finest silk they trade. Let's start with a little myth-busting. The Mongols weren't just a bunch of gruff warriors, all brawn and no brain. Sure, they could shoot an arrow while galloping full tilt, an impressive feat that would leave modern archery enthusiasts both awestruck and envious. But their true genius lay in their ability to orchestrate a society that was as fluid as it was formidable. It's like thinking of them as both the quarterback and the coach of a medieval NFL team, calling the shots with strategic precision. First up, the roles within the caravan. It's a well-oiled machine with each cog fulfilling a specific purpose. At the top of the hierarchy sits the chieftain, or Khan, the big cheese if you will. But don't picture a tyrannical overlord barking orders from an ivory tower. These leaders were more like the CEOs of their time, balancing brute force with diplomacy, a combination that would make any modern politician green with envy. They knew how to wield power, not just through fear, but with a keen understanding of human nature. Think of them as the Steve Jobs of the steppe, charismatic, visionary, and occasionally terrifying. But here's the kicker. Women in Mongol society wielded far more influence than you'd expect from a medieval narrative. Forget the damsel in distress trope. Mongol women were the unsung heroines of the empire. They ran the show when the men were off on conquests, managing everything from household affairs to trade negotiations. Some even donned armor and took up arms alongside their male counterparts. Kuturun, a niece of Kublai Khan, was renowned for her prowess in wrestling, a sport dominated by men. She reportedly demanded that any suitor must first defeat her in a wrestling match, a feat none achieved, as she remained undefeated. Kutulun was the Ronda Rousey of her era, minus the pay-per-view contracts. Women in the caravan handled the daily logistics too. They were the architects of the gers, the managers of livestock, and the keepers of the family economy. Essentially, they were the CFOs of their households, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. It's a role that required shrewdness, resourcefulness, and a knack for multitasking that would put any modern-day executive to shame. In a world where survival hung by a thread, these women were the backbone, the unsung strategists who kept the empire running. Now, let's bust another myth. Not all Mongol leaders were stern, unsmiling warriors. Sure, Genghis Khan could strike fear into the heart of an entire continent, but he was also a man of exceptional strategic acumen. This was a guy who understood the importance of merit over birthright, promoting individuals based on talent rather than noble lineage. It's a concept that feels light years ahead of its time, like finding a smartphone in a medieval drawstring pouch. Genghis Khan's leadership style was both progressive and pragmatic. He established a legal code known as the Yasa, which was as much about unifying his people as it was about keeping them in line. Forget the idea of a chaotic horde. This was a society with laws, guidelines, and a deep respect for order. The Yasa enforced harsh penalties for theft and betrayal, but it also encouraged religious tolerance and granted protection to diplomats and merchants. It was a blend of carrot and stick, a testament to his understanding of governance. And what about the common folk? The everyday members of the caravan were more than just anonymous faces in a crowd. They were essential cogs in this nomadic machine, each with a role that contributed to the larger goal. Whether they were herding sheep, mending gear, or scouting new routes, their work was vital. The Mongol Empire was a collective effort, a testament to the power of unity and shared purpose. The structure of Mongol society was as flexible as it was formidable. They embraced a form of meritocracy that allowed for fluid social mobility. If you had the skills, you'd rise through the ranks faster than you could say tartar sauce. But don't romanticize it too much. This was still a society that operated under the iron fist of its leaders. Dissenters and rebels faced severe consequences, often of the head-chopping variety. Let's just say the Mongol HR department didn't mess around. As the day winds down and evening approaches, the caravan begins to set up camp. It's a routine as familiar as the rising sun, yet each time feels like a small miracle. The gurs are reassembled, the animals tended to, and fires lit to stave off the evening chill. It's a scene that speaks to the resilience and adaptability of the Mongol people, a testament to their ability to thrive in a world that was as volatile as it was vast. And as the stars begin to dot the sky, you can't help but marvel at the complexity of this society on the move. The Mongols were more than just conquerors. They were innovators, strategists, and community builders. Their legacy is a reminder that history is rarely black and white, and that the most powerful empires are not built on brute force alone, but on a foundation of cunning, cooperation, and an unyielding will to adapt. So, as the caravan settles into its nightly rhythm, the echoes of the day's journey linger in the air, a testament to the intricate dance of roles and hierarchies that define this society. It's a story of balance and brilliance, a reminder that even in the harshest of environments, humanity's spirit of innovation and cooperation can shine through. And as you drift off to sleep under the vast Mongolian sky, the journey continues, a living tapestry of history woven with the threads of adventure, ambition, and survival. As the stars begin to dot the sky, you might find yourself pondering the dizzying legacy of those Mongol caravans. Picture this. You're not just part of a moving encampment, but a living, breathing testament to one of history's greatest cultural exchanges. The Mongol caravans were like the Wi-Fi routers of the Middle Ages, creating a network that connected the farthest reaches of the known world. They didn't just conquer lands, they connected them. It's easy to get swept up in the romance of the Mongols as fearsome warriors riding into battle, but let's not forget their less glamorous but equally impressive role as the original globalizers. Their empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the doorstep of Europe, a whopping 9 million square miles. That's more than double the size of the Roman Empire at its zenith. Under their reign, trade routes flourished and cultural exchanges blossomed like never before. Take the Silk Road, for example. This wasn't just a single dusty trail, but a sprawling network of trade routes that crisscrossed Asia. And the Mongols? They were like the world's first logistics company, ensuring the safe passage of goods, ideas, and even diseases. Yep, they inadvertently helped facilitate the spread of the Black Death. But let's focus on the positives for a moment. Through Mongol hands, innovations like paper money and gunpowder found their way to Europe. These weren't just trinkets, they were transformative technologies. Paper money simplified trade, while gunpowder revolutionized warfare. The Mongols didn't invent these things, but they sure knew how to spread them around. Imagine Marco Polo, the ultimate travel influencer, returning to Venice with tales of Chinese paper currency. Talk about a game changer. It's like introducing Bitcoin to a world still obsessed with coins. Let's talk about the Pax Mongolica, the sort of medieval peace treaty that made travel across Asia safer than it had been in centuries. This wasn't just a utopian dream. It was a reality enforced by the Mongol Empire's iron grip. Merchants and travellers could journey from one end of the empire to the other without fear of bandit attacks. It's like the Mongols were running history's first antivirus software, keeping the trade routes free from the malware of banditry. But what about the brutality? You can't discuss the Mongols without acknowledging their penchant for, well, aggressive expansion. Sure, Genghis Khan and his successors had a reputation for razing cities and leaving piles of skulls in their wake. It's not exactly the stuff of Hallmark cards, but there's more to this story. The Mongol strategy was often one of psychological warfare. The threat of their arrival was sometimes enough to make cities surrender without a fight, sparing lives and preserving infrastructure. It was a brutal calculus, but one that often worked to their advantage. Yet their empire wasn't held together by fear alone. The Mongols were extraordinary administrators and diplomats. They knew that sustaining an empire required more than just conquest. It demanded cooperation. They employed local administrators, respected religious practices, and even granted tax exemptions to clerics. It's like they were running a medieval PR campaign, winning hearts and minds while expanding their territorial footprint. And what about the cultural exchanges? The Mongols were like the world's first cultural ambassadors, fostering an exchange of art, science, and philosophy. They brought Persian astronomers to China, Chinese engineers to Persia, and even welcomed European missionaries into their midst. This was a melting pot before melting pots were cool. It was during this period that the concept of zero, the decimal system, and even chess spread along these routes, ideas as valuable as any silk or spice. The Mongol Empire may have eventually crumbled, but its legacy is a testament to the power of connectivity. Their story isn't just one of conquest, but of synthesis, melding different cultures into a richer, more complex whole. They remind us that the most enduring empires are those that adapt, innovate, and integrate. So, as you drift off under the vast Mongolian sky, let the lessons of the Caravan linger. The Mongols weren't just conquerors, they were connectors, innovators, and visionaries. Their empire was a bridge between worlds, a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. And while their methods were often brutal, their legacy is a reminder that progress often comes from the most unexpected places. In the end, the Mongol way of life was a balancing act between the romantic and the ruthless, a testament to the dual nature of humanity itself. They showed us that history is a tapestry woven with both beauty and brutality, and that the most enduring stories are those that embrace both. As the night deepens, the echoes of their journey resonate, reminding us that the past is never truly gone but a living part of who we are. Ancient Mesopotamia, where clay and creativity gave birth to the written word, is a land of mind-boggling contradictions and cradle of human civilization. Picture this, fertile plains sandwiched between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Could there be a more dramatic setting for the birth of bureaucracy? The ingenuity of these ancient peoples turned mud into a medium of expression and administration. Before these clever folks picked up their styluses, they were probably too busy trying to remember where they'd left their goats, into the scribes. Mesopotamia's answer to Excel spreadsheets, but with more flair and definitely more clay under their fingernails. Now, let's get one thing straight. Scribes weren't the mystical sages Hollywood might have you believe. Their job wasn't to decode the mysteries of the universe, but to make sure that when someone said they owned 50 sheep, they weren't fibbing. Think of them as the original pencil pushers, only their pencils were reeds and their paper was a slab of wet clay. Glamorous, right? But don't underestimate the power of these clay tablets. They were the ancient world's equivalent of a hard drive, storing everything from trade transactions to tax records and even the occasional love letter. Yes, folks, bureaucracy and romance have a long, intertwined history. The need for scribes arose as cities grew larger and more complex. Around 3200 BCE, as populations boomed, so did the necessity for keeping track of things, livestock, grain, debts, and, inevitably, taxes. Picture early scribes hunched over their clay tablets, etching marks known as cuneiform, which is just a fancy way of saying wedge-shaped. These symbols started as simple pictograms, but as the need for more nuanced communication grew, so did the complexity of the writing. It's like the evolution from emojis to the Oxford Dictionary, only it took a few thousand years. By the way, if you're imagining that every Mesopotamian was a literate whiz, think again. Literacy was a rarefied skill, much like understanding the tax code today. Scribes were a privileged class, given their own schools, tablet houses, where they spent years learning the art of writing. It's a bit like Hogwarts, but instead of spells, they mastered the incantations of inventory lists. And while the allure of being a scribe might sound enticing to anyone with a penchant for paperwork, it wasn't all intellectual glamour. Scribes were expected to be meticulous and precise, because a misplaced wedge could turn a 10-sheep debt into 10,000 sheep, and no one needs that kind of drama. As romantic as it might sound to be the custodians of civilization's earliest written records, the reality was more corporate than cosmic. Scribes were instrumental in maintaining the machinery of state and commerce. They weren't authoring epic tales of heroism. They were busy ensuring the king's granaries were full and that the temple's accounts were in the black. You could say they were the unsung heroes of antiquity, the ones making sure the wheels of civilization didn't grind to a screeching halt. The earliest forms of writing, like cuneiform, were initially developed for practical purposes, to keep track of goods and services. But as cities like Uruk, and Babylon expanded, so did the applications of writing. The scribes' clay tablets became the canvas for a wide array of human endeavors, from legal codes like Hammurabi's famous set of laws around 1754 BCE, to astronomical calculations and even the first known recipes. Yes, ancient Mesopotamians were as preoccupied with food as we are today, and they left behind a culinary legacy etched in clay. But let's not gloss over the nitty-gritty. Learning to be a scribe was no walk in the hanging gardens. It required years of training, and mistakes were not taken lightly. A scribe in training could expect to spend long hours under the watchful eyes of their instructors perfecting their cuneiform script. A slip of the stylus could lead to a miscalculation that might upset entire trade agreements or royal decrees. No pressure, right? Despite the romanticized image of scribes as solitary scholars, they were very much part of the social and economic fabric of Mesopotamian life. They worked for temples, palaces, and private merchants, each with their own agendas and demands. These scribes were as much a part of the ancient corporate ladder as modern office workers are today, complete with the stress of meeting deadlines and the occasional office politics. So, next time you find yourself lamenting the bureaucratic nature of modern life, take a moment to appreciate those early Mesopotamian scribes. They paved the way for all the paperwork that followed, turning the mundane task of record-keeping into a cornerstone of civilization. Without them, we might still be trying to remember where we left our goats. And who knows, maybe in another few millennia, our descendants will look back at our data entry with the same mix of awe and amusement. Now that's a thought to ponder as you drift off to sleep, perhaps dreaming of ancient scribes and their wedge-shaped wonders. Let's peel back the layers of clay and ink-stained fingers to uncover the truth behind the making of a Mesopotamian scribe. If you thought these folks were born with a stylus in hand and a head full of cuneiform, think again. Becoming a scribe wasn't about destiny, it was about sweat, persistence, and a whole lot of clay dust. The born genius's narrative is about as accurate as claiming cats are natural-born typists. In reality, aspiring scribes embarked on a journey more akin to a grueling boot camp than a genteel academic pursuit. Enrolling in a tablet house was just the beginning. These institutions were less Ivy League, more boot camp, demanding years of precise training. Picture a classroom not unlike a modern-day coding boot camp, where the curriculum was as dense as the clay tablets they used. It was a process of rote memorization and repetitive practice, with students expected to memorize a dizzying array of symbols, over 600 to be precise. Yep, that's more glyphs than your smartphone has emojis. And let's not gloss over the instructors, who were less like the nurturing professors of your dreams and more like drill sergeants with a penchant for punctuation. The price of learning was high, not just in effort but also in cold, hard barley. Tuition often came in the form of agricultural produce, livestock, or even silver, putting financial pressure on families. The economic implications were significant. Investing in a child's education was a gamble, a bit like buying a share in a tech startup. Success meant lucrative job prospects, but failure could leave a family in the red. The apprenticeship system was the backbone of this education, where young scribes to be learned from seasoned veterans. This was less about learning by osmosis and more about surviving a trial by fire. Mistakes weren't just frowned upon, they were a threat to the economic stability of a business or state department. A misplaced wedge here, a miscalculated sheep count there, and you could find yourself in hot water, or worse, out of a job. Speaking of jobs, let's talk about why anyone would endure this grueling process in the first place. Simply put, being a scribe was akin to holding a golden ticket in the Mesopotamian job market. Once trained, scribes were in high demand, their skills opening doors to positions in temples, palaces, and private enterprises. It was a career path that promised stability and prestige, a rarity in the ancient world, where most folks were just trying to keep their sandals from wearing out. In a world where the average Mesopotamian was more likely to be tilling the fields or herding livestock, the scribe stood out. They were the gatekeepers of knowledge, the custodians of culture, and in many ways the architects of civilization's bureaucracy. Their work was highly specialized, and their skills were not just respected but essential. Much like today's software engineers or financial analysts, scribes could command higher salaries and enjoy a level of job security that was the envy of their peers. Now, let's draw a cheeky parallel to modern times. Swap out clay tablets for student loans, and you've got a familiar tale. Today's aspiring professionals often find themselves buried in debt, all for the promise of a well-paying job at the end of the educational rainbow. The costs of education have soared, and while the tools have changed, styluses for laptops, clay for digital clouds, the stakes remain curiously similar. The promise of a rewarding career still dangles like a carrot just out of reach, with the ever-present spectre of financial ruin lurking in the shadows. The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? In Mesopotamia, the payoff for a scribe's training was real and tangible. Secure employment, social status, and a comfortable life were the rewards for those who made the cut. However, the pressure to perform was immense. In a world without erasers or backspaces, the margin for error was slim. Mesopotamian scribes had to be as precise as a surgeon with a scalpel, with none of the modern conveniences we take for granted. As we continue to unearth the realities of the scribe's life, it's clear that they were far from the mystical beings of legend. They were hard-working, driven individuals who understood the value of their craft and the weight of their responsibilities. Their journey was one of grit and determination, not innate genius. So, the next time you find yourself lamenting the complexities of your job or the weight of your student loans, spare a thought for these early careerists. They were the original trailblazers, paving the way for centuries of scribes, clerks, and paper pushers to come. And let's not forget, their ink-stained legacy lives on in the very fabric of our modern lives. From the contracts we sign to the spreadsheets we populate, the influence of those ancient scribes is all around us. They were the unsung heroes of their time, silently etching their way into history, one wedge at a time. As we delve further into their world, we'll uncover more about how their work shaped the society they served, leaving an indelible mark on the annals of time. Stay tuned as we unravel the intricate tapestry of Mesopotamian life, one clay tablet at a time. As we delve further into the world of Mesopotamian scribes, it's time to shine a light on their multifaceted roles, because these folks were more than just record-keeping machines. Their styluses weren't just for tallying sheep or jotting down grocery lists. They were tools of influence and power. Let's kick things off with the pièce de résistance of their workload, documenting laws like the famous Code of Hammurabi. This stone slab of justice, carved around 754 BCE, was a scribe's magnum opus, a legal symphony that laid down 282 laws in excruciating detail. From property rights to penalties for theft, it was a comprehensive guide to societal do's and don'ts. Now, if you're picturing a courtroom drama with scribes as silent stenographers, think again. These ancient legal eagles wielded significant sway over the interpretation and application of laws. After all, a well-placed wedge could mean the difference between a slap on the wrist and a much harsher fate. Scribes were the intermediaries between the written word and the populace, translating complex legal jargon into something the average Mesopotamian could digest, assuming they could read, of course. But scribes didn't stop at law. They were the financial wizards of their day, managing the accounts of temples and palaces like ancient CFOs. Imagine them hunched over tablets, keeping track of grain stocks, temple donations, and royal expenditures with the precision of a seasoned accountant. And let's not forget taxes. Those dreaded Jews didn't collect themselves. Scribes were the ones to ensure that the king's coffers remained full, and any discrepancies could lead to a very awkward conversation with the powers that be. It's a good thing they had their clay tablets to back them up, an ancient audit trail, if you will. With great responsibility came great political clout. Scribes were gatekeepers of information in a society where knowledge was power. They were the ones who documented treaties, trade agreements, and diplomatic correspondence, subtly shaping the geopolitical landscape. Their work wasn't just about recording events, it was about influencing them. By controlling the narrative, scribes held a quiet but undeniable power that went beyond their humble clay desks. They were the puppet masters behind the scenes, pulling the strings of history with deft hands. Yet, let's not romanticize their position too much. While they had their fingers in many pies, their roles weren't without risk. A scribe's mistake could lead to more than just embarrassment. It could mean economic turmoil or political fallout. The pressure was intense, and the stakes were high. But for those who could handle the heat, the rewards were worth it. Scribes enjoyed a level of prestige and stability that was rare in an unpredictable world. They were respected, even revered, as the intellectual elite of Mesopotamian society. And here's a twist. Scribes weren't just passive observers. They actively participated in the shaping of policies and decisions. Take the example of Enheduanna, the high priestess of the moon god Nanna, and a scribe who penned hymns and prayers that were as politically charged as they were poetic. Her writings weren't just religious texts, they were expressions of power used to solidify her father's reign and influence public opinion. It's a reminder that words have always been a potent tool in the arsenal of leadership. So, were scribes just silent recorders of history? Far from it. They were the editors, the gatekeepers, the spin doctors of their time. Their influence was subtle but significant, an undercurrent that shaped the course of events in ways that are still felt today. They were the ones who turned the chaos of human activity into a coherent narrative, crafting the stories that would be passed down through the ages. In many ways, they were the architects of civilization, building the framework upon which societies were constructed. In the end, the legacy of the Mesopotamian scribes is a testament to the power of the written word. They were the unsung heroes of antiquity, their contributions etched not only in clay but in the very fabric of history. Their work reminds us that while the tools of communication may change, the essence of storytelling remains the same, a reflection of the human experience captured in words that transcend time. As we continue our journey through the annals of history, let's keep in mind that the scribe's story is far from over. There's more to uncover, more layers to peel back as we explore the intricate tapestry of Mesopotamian life, one clay tablet at a time. And so, armed with styluses and clay tablets, the scribes of Mesopotamia embarked on the task of chronicling the chaos of human civilization. These weren't just your average office supplies. These were the tools that built empires, or at least kept them from toppling over like a poorly stacked ziggurat. The stylus, typically crafted from reed, was the ancient precursor to our modern ballpoint pen, though decidedly less disposable and more likely to give you a splinter. Imagine dragging one of these bad boys across a wet clay tablet, leaving wedge-shaped impressions, cuneiform, to the initiated. It was the epitome of analog data entry. Clay, abundant and malleable, was the medium of choice. Forget your high-end stationery. Mesopotamian scribes had mud. But before you scoff, consider the brilliance of it, durable, reusable, and conveniently sourced from the nearest riverbank. Once inscribed, tablets were left to dry in the sun or baked in kilns, transforming them into durable records that could withstand the test of time, or at least until someone dropped one. Now, maintaining these vast archives was a logistical feat worthy of a modern IT department. Picture sprawling libraries filled with clay tablets, each one meticulously catalogued. Think of it as a low-tech version of the cloud, but with far more dust and a distinct lack of a search function. Librarians, the unsung heroes of the ancient world, organized these collections, ensuring that a request for last year's barley exports didn't result in an ode to the moon god. Misfiling wasn't just an inconvenience, it could derail an entire trade agreement. In terms of environmental challenges, scribes faced more than just the occasional clay shortage. Floods from the Tigris and Euphrates could wreak havoc, soaking tablets and leaving them vulnerable to the elements. But necessity is the mother of invention, and Mesopotamians were nothing if not resourceful. They built elevated storage rooms and developed waterproofing techniques using bitumen to protect their precious records. Talk about a data recovery plan. But let's talk about irony for a moment. While today's digital dilemmas revolve around server crashes and data breaches, the scribes had their own version of a tech meltdown. Imagine spending months documenting a city's tax records only for a single cracked tablet to send the whole system into chaos. It's almost poetic, isn't it? Millennia of wisdom lost to something as mundane as an accidental drop. This brings us to the question, how did these ancient data handlers ensure the longevity of their records? Besides the aforementioned kilning, some tablets were duplicated, the ancient equivalent of a backup drive. Important documents, like treaties and law codes, were inscribed on stone or metal for added permanence. A wise choice, given the tendency of clay to crumble when things got heated, literally or metaphorically. Yet despite these precautions, not all records survived the test of time. Wars, fires, and the relentless march of history took their toll. Still, the sheer volume of surviving tablets is a testament to their creators' ingenuity and determination. Thousands of these clay records have been unearthed, offering a window into a world long past. Let's pause and appreciate the irony of our modern age. While we wrestle with the complexities of digital storage, the Mesopotamians, with their simple tools and straightforward methods, managed to preserve vast amounts of information without a single byte. It's a humbling thought that in our quest for technological advancement, we might have lost something as simple and effective as a clay tablet. But before you start hoarding pottery in preparation for the next digital apocalypse, remember that the scribes' legacy was more than just their records. They were innovators, problem solvers, and custodians of knowledge. They remind us that creativity and adaptability are timeless qualities, essential for navigating the complexities of any era. As we continue to explore the depths of Mesopotamian life, it's clear that these ancient scribes were more than mere record keepers. They were the architects of civilization, one careful wedge at a time. And as we peer into the past through the lens of their achievements, we find that the scribe story is far from over. Their innovations laid the groundwork for future generations, shaping the course of history in ways that are still being discovered today. So, stay with us as we continue this journey through the annals of Mesopotamian history, uncovering the secrets of a world where clay and creativity crafted the foundation of civilization. And so, as we dust off these ancient clay tablets and peer into the annals of time, it's clear that the scribes of Mesopotamia were more than mere record keepers. They were the forebears of every accountant, historian, and bureaucrat who followed. Their meticulous documenting laid the bedrock for modern civilization, providing a scaffold upon which empires were built and dynasties maintained. But here's the kicker. While their legacy is monumental, the fall of their profession is a testament to the relentless march of progress. As with any profession, the scribes weren't immune to the winds of change. Fast forward a few centuries, and you'll find that the language itself began to morph. Cuneiform, with its dizzying array of over 600 symbols, wasn't exactly the Rosetta Stone of convenience. Enter the alphabet, a revolutionary invention that took the complexity of cuneiform and shaved it down to a lean, mean 22-letter machine, thanks to the Phoenicians around 1050 BCE. This was the Gutenberg moment of the ancient world, a streamlined system that anyone with a bit of patience could master. Talk about a disruptive innovation. It's the ancient equivalent of switching from dial-up to fiber optic internet. The alphabet spread like wildfire, making literacy accessible to a broader audience. It was a double-edged stylus for the scribes. On one hand, the democratization of writing meant that knowledge was no longer the exclusive domain of the elite. On the other, it rendered the painstakingly trained scribes a bit like the proverbial buggy whip makers in the age of the automobile. And let's not even get started on the technological advancements that followed. The invention of papyrus in Egypt and parchment in other regions made clay tablets look like, well, the Stone Age. Scribes could no longer rely on the tactile satisfaction of etching into clay. Instead, they had to adapt to these new media or face obsolescence. It was a classic case of adapt or perish, and many scribes found themselves at a career crossroads. Yet, while the medium transformed, the power of the written word endured. The scribe's legacy is etched not only in clay, but in the very fabric of human communication. Their methods laid the groundwork for contracts, laws, and literature, evolving into the complex systems of governance and culture we know today. As the torch was passed to those who wielded quills and ink, the essence of the scribe's craft persisted, albeit in a different form. But here's the real irony. As we sit here in our digital age, surrounded by screens and keyboards, we're witnessing a renaissance of sorts. Today's scribes, the bloggers, programmers, and data analysts are the modern custodians of information. They catalogue the human experience not in clay, but in bits and bytes, leaving digital footprints for future generations to decipher. The stakes are different, but the game remains the same. It's a reminder that while the tools of communication may evolve, the essence of storytelling and record-keeping is timeless. So, what can we learn from these ancient scribes? For one, there's a lesson in resilience and adaptability. In every era, those who thrive are the ones who can pivot with the times, embracing new technologies while preserving the core values of their craft. And then there's the matter of legacy. The scribes' contribution to civilization is a testament to the enduring power of the written word, a power that transcends the medium itself. As we ponder the future, one can't help but wonder how today's digital scribes will be remembered. Will our tweets and emails be the clay tablets of tomorrow, studied by future historians as relics of a bygone era? It's a thought-provoking notion, one that underscores the ephemeral nature of information in a rapidly changing world. In the end, the scribes of Mesopotamia remind us that while civilizations rise and fall, the written word remains a steadfast keeper of human endeavor. Their legacy lives on in every document, every text, and every story told. So next time you find yourself grumbling about data entry or the monotony of record-keeping, remember, you're part of a tradition that stretches back thousands of years, a continuity of scribes who have shaped the world with their words. And as we close the cuneiform curtain on our journey through ancient Mesopotamia, let's carry forward the spirit of those scribes, curious, meticulous, and ever adaptive, into our own digital futures. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that the power of the written word is a force that can transcend time, uniting generations in the shared tapestry of human experience. If you've ever had the sneaking suspicion that your daily planner isn't up to snuff, let me introduce you to the Mayans, a civilization that took calendar making to a level that would make even the most organized German engineer weep with envy. These guys weren't just doodling dates and lunar phases. They were orchestrating a cosmic symphony with a precision that makes atomic clocks look like dollar store knockoffs. Now, before you picture a bunch of ancient folks in feathered headdresses chilling under a pyramid while sipping on cacao, let's get one thing straight. The Mayans were astronomical powerhouses. They were the kind of people who wouldn't just predict an eclipse. They'd tell you exactly when to pack your bags for the end of the world with a smile and a wink. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of their celestial prowess, starting with their calendar system. Forget your typical Gregorian calendar with its leap years and occasional confusion over daylight saving time. The Mayans had multiple calendars running simultaneously, like a multitasking prodigy. The most famous of these is the long count calendar, which, contrary to popular belief, didn't predict the world would end in 2012. That was a misunderstanding. More on that little doomsday drama later. The long count calendar is a bit like the sophisticated cousin of the Julian calendar, which was used by the Romans and, let's face it, was about as accurate as a weather forecast in the Middle Ages. The Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar in 46 BCE, was based on a year that was roughly 365.25 days long. Not bad for a time when people thought the Earth was the center of the universe, but it still drifted off course by about a day every 128 years. Enter the Mayans with their long count calendar, which measures a year at approximately 365.242 days. That's a difference of just 0.02 days from the actual solar year. In other words, the Mayans were so spot on that their calendar would only be off by a single day after 8,000 years. Take that, Caesar! This precision didn't happen by accident. The Mayans were keen observers of the sky, and their astronomical observations were so advanced that they could predict solar and lunar eclipses with remarkable accuracy. They didn't have telescopes or fancy gadgets, just their sharp eyes and an unyielding obsession with the heavens. It's like they had VIP access to the universe's backstage pass. The long count calendar itself was a thing of wonder. It started on a date equivalent to August 11, 3114 BCE in our Gregorian calendar, and it was designed to track longer periods of time. Think millennia, not just a few years. This was no ordinary calendar. It was a cosmic ledger, measuring out time in units like baktuns, katuns, and tons. A baktun, for example, was equivalent to 144,000 days, or about 394.3 years. The Mayans used the system to track historical events, celestial phenomena, and, of course, the occasional apocalypse prediction. Now, speaking of apocalyptic predictions, The Mayans had a bit of a reputation thanks to a misinterpretation that swept across the globe faster than a cat video goes viral. Remember 2012? People partied like it was the end of the world because they thought the Mayan calendar was running out of pages. In reality, December 21st, 2012 marked the end of a backtoon, a significant milestone, but not exactly the cataclysmic finale Hollywood might have you believe. If anything, it was more like the cosmic equivalent of flipping to a new page in your disk. Calendar, exciting, sure, but not exactly cause for panic. The Mayans were meticulous record keepers, and their understanding of time was deeply intertwined with their religious beliefs and societal functions. They believed that time was cyclical, a series of recurring ages that repeated over vast expanses of time. The cyclical nature of time meant that each cycle brought with it the possibility of renewal and transformation. It's as if they had the ultimate new year, new me mantra, but on a cosmic scale. In addition to the long count, the Mayans used the Tzolk'in, a 260-day calendar that was primarily used for religious and ceremonial purposes, and the Hab, a 365-day solar calendar that tracked the agricultural year. The Tzolk'in was like their spiritual guidebook, dictating rituals and ceremonies with a rhythm as complex as a Beethoven symphony. Meanwhile, the Hab kept them in tune with the seasons, ensuring that they were always ready to plant and harvest at the right times. These calendars weren't just instruments of timekeeping, they were woven into the very fabric of Mayan society. They influenced everything from the timing of religious ceremonies to the planning of military campaigns. The Mayans didn't just watch the stars, they lived by them, letting the heavens dictate the tempo of their lives in a way that's both awe-inspiring and a bit terrifying. Imagine planning your life by celestial events. Sorry, can't make it to brunch. My horoscope says there's a lunar eclipse. In a world where time was sacred and the stars were seen as the gods' way of communicating, the Mayans stood as the ultimate Time Lords. They weren't just counting days, they were counting the very essence of existence. And while they might have been off in predicting humanity's end, their understanding of the celestial dance was anything but amateur. It's a testament to their ingenuity that their calendars still spark conversations and, occasionally, global panic. So, next time you glance at your calendar app, remember the Mayans. Those ancient astronomers who didn't just track time, they lived it, grieved it, and celebrated its cosmic wonder. They might not have had Google Calendar reminders, but they sure knew how to plan a doomsday party with flair. Now, as much as we'd love to think the Mayans were just starry-eyed romantics gazing at the sky with a dreamy sigh, there was a lot more at play here. This wasn't some ancient version of stargazing for leisure. It was a high-stakes game with power and influence hanging in the balance. Picture this. Priest astronomers, the rock stars of Mayan society, wielding their celestial knowledge like a finely tuned instrument of political power. These guys weren't just watching the skies, they were orchestrating their communities like a maestro, conducting a symphony of celestial and terrestrial harmony. Economically speaking, the Mayans were no strangers to the concept of supply and demand, and boy did they demand a lot from their priest astronomers. These mystical mathematicians were responsible for predicting celestial events, which were seen as divine messages. Talk about pressure. Imagine if your weather app not only had to predict rain but also had to assure you that the gods were satisfied with your latest corn harvest. No pressure, right? But here's the kicker. These astronomical predictions were not just for show. They had real economic implications. A well-timed solar eclipse could be spun into a divine endorsement of a ruler's power. It's as if the heavens themselves were casting their vote in favor of the king. And let me tell you, any modern politician would kill for PR as effective as a solar eclipse. Forget campaign ads and debates. Just have the sun disappear for a few minutes at your rally, and boom, instant authority. The economic roots of Mayan astronomy also dug deep into agriculture, the backbone of their civilization. The Mayans weren't just planting crops willy-nilly, they were using their astronomical observations to determine the best times for planting and harvesting. The priest astronomers would consult the heavens to ensure that every seed sown had the divine approval of the cosmos. This wasn't just practical, it was essential for survival. A failed harvest could spell disaster for a city-state, and you can bet the priest astronomers felt the heat if the corn didn't grow. Now, let's talk about these priest astronomers. No ordinary sky gazers. These folks were revered figures in Mayan society. They weren't just scientists. They were also political strategists, religious leaders, and community influencers all rolled into one. Picture them as the ultimate polymaths, wielding knowledge with the flair of a Renaissance man, centuries before that term even came to be. They knew how to read the stars, interpret their meanings, and translate those celestial whispers into earthly actions. These priest astronomers were also adept at using celestial events to maintain the social order. Eclipses, for example, were seen as powerful omens. The sudden disappearance of the sun or moon was not just a jaw-dropping spectacle. It was a celestial warning, a cosmic nudge to get your act together. And who better to interpret these warnings than the priest astronomers? They could spin an eclipse as a sign of impending doom if the populace didn't toe the line, essentially using the sky as a celestial carrot and stick. The societal importance of these celestial events cannot be overstated. Eclipses were like the Super Bowl halftime show of the ancient world. Everyone stopped what they were doing to watch. And just like today's halftime shows, these events were rife with symbolism and open to interpretation. A solar eclipse could signify the god's displeasure, calling for sacrifices, or, more optimistically, a chance for renewal if the rituals were performed correctly. And what about the rulers who leapt at the chance to align themselves with these celestial spectacles? They knew that controlling the narrative around these events was as crucial as the events themselves. By claiming divine favor, a ruler could solidify their power, quell dissent, and rally the masses. It was a political masterstroke, leveraging the awe of nature to keep the wheels of power turning smoothly. This intertwining of the celestial and political worlds was a strategy that would make any modern spin Dr. Green with envy. Imagine having the ability to declare that the universe itself was endorsing your policies. No need for polling data or press releases, just point to the heavens and let the cosmic light show do the talking. In essence, Mayan astronomical practices were a sophisticated blend of science, religion, and politics, a trifecta of influence that underpinned their civilization. By melding these elements, the Mayans created a society where the stars were not only guides, but also guarantors of power. The priest astronomers, with their eyes on the skies and their influence on the ground, ensured that society moved in lockstep with the celestial rhythms. As we peel back the layers of this ancient world, it's clear that the Mayans had mastered the art of celestial manipulation long before it became a staple in our modern storytelling. They didn't just interpret the stars, they used them, weaving them into the fabric of daily life, economy, and governance. Theirs was a world where the celestial and the terrestrial danced in tandem, a cosmic ballet choreographed by those who knew how to read the stars and spin their stories. So, next time you find yourself under a starry sky, remember that for the Mayans, those twinkling lights were more than just pretty points of light. They were the keys to understanding the universe and the levers of power that shaped their world. And while our modern gaze might be clouded by city lights and digital distractions, there's something timeless in the way the Mayans saw the heavens. Not as distant or indifferent, but as integral players in the grand drama of life. While the Mayans were starry-eyed architects of the cosmos, they weren't exactly daydreaming about lunar love songs. No, these celestial enthusiasts were more like ancient project managers with a penchant for practicality. Let's debunk the myth that the Mayans were simply mystics, craning their necks at the stars with nothing but wonder in their hearts. Their stargazing had a much more down-to-earth purpose. It was about survival, prosperity, and the occasional divine PR stunt. First off, let's tackle the myth of their alleged obsession with the stars. Sure, they were keen observers, but this wasn't an ancient version of a hippie commune staring at constellations for kicks. The Mayans were more concerned with the nitty-gritty details of life on Earth, using their stellar knowledge to make tangible improvements. The heavens were their user manual for managing life's unpredictability, from knowing when to plant corn to deciding the auspicious day for a new king's coronation. Consider agriculture, the cornerstone of their civilization. The Mayans didn't just rely on rain dances and celestial whims to grow their crops. They used their astronomical observations to draft what was essentially the ancient farmer's almanac. The Harb calendar, for example, was about as close as you could get to a cosmic spreadsheet for agriculture. It divided the year into 18 months of 20 days each, with a bonus 5-day period called Wayabs, that was considered a time of uncertainty, a sort of ancient version of Mercury in retrograde, if you will. These calendars helped them determine the best times for planting and harvesting. Crucial when your survival depended on a bountiful maize crop. And it wasn't just about growing food. It was about sustaining a complex society with urban centers like Tikal and Copan, where feeding the masses required more than just good luck and rainfall. You see, the Mayans were the original masters of sustainable agriculture, using techniques like terracing and raised fields to maximize yield and minimize environmental impact. So, while we might picture them as starry-eyed dreamers, in reality they were more like environmental engineers with a celestial twist. Now, let's talk about city planning. The Mayans didn't just toss up a pyramid wherever the mood struck them. Their cities were often laid out with cosmic precision, aligning with celestial events to enhance their spiritual significance and, let's be honest, to show off a bit. Take Chichen Itza, where the Temple of Kukulkan is famous for its serpent shadow phenomenon during the equinoxes. It's not just a neat trick for impressing tourists, it's a testament to their architectural prowess and astronomical acumen. This wasn't mysticism, this was genius-level urban planning with a side of cosmic flair. The practical application of their star studies extended to their political sphere as well. Rulers and priest astronomers didn't just gaze at the skies for personal enlightenment. They used their observations to justify decisions and maintain social order. A well-timed eclipse could be spun into a divine endorsement or warning, depending on what the political climate called for. It was like having the universe on speed dial, ready to drop a celestial mic when needed. And let's bust another myth while we're at it. The Mayans weren't merely priestly stargazers living in an ivory tower. They were deeply entrenched in the daily grind of their society. The priest astronomers were responsible for everything from tracking the movement of Venus to predicting eclipses, all while making sure the corn didn't fail and the king's power stayed intact. It was a high-stakes job with no room for error, and the consequences of a miscalculation could be as catastrophic as a failed harvest or a political coup. So, while there's a romantic appeal to the idea of the Mayans as mystical star whisperers, the reality is far richer and more complex. Their astronomical practices were grounded in practical necessity, interwoven with the socio-political fabric of their time. It wasn't just about reading the stars, it was about integrating that knowledge into the very essence of their civilization. In short, the Mayans weren't just looking up for inspiration. They were looking forward, using the stars as a guide to navigate the challenges of their earthly existence. This celestial pragmatism is what set the Mayans apart. They didn't just observe the universe, they interacted with it, bending it to the needs of their world. And while it's easy to get lost in the allure of their starry narratives, we must remember the grit and ingenuity that defined their relationship with the cosmos. This was a civilization that didn't just dream in starlight. They lived in it, using every ounce of celestial wisdom to fortify their earthly domains. And as we continue our journey through their cosmic achievements, let's keep in mind that the Mayans were a blend of dreamers and doers, harnessing the power of the stars to shape their destiny. In the next installment, we'll delve deeper into how this cosmic knowledge influenced their art, culture, and even their ultimate decline. A cautionary tale of how even the mightiest civilizations can fade when the stars no longer align in their favor. Stay tuned as we unravel more of this celestial saga, where the romance of the stars meets the hard truths of history. As we meander through the ruins of Mayan civilization, it's hard not to feel like a time traveler with a penchant for architectural wonders. Let's start our tour at Chichen Itza, a site that's practically a celebrity among ancient cities, and not just because it's a frequent flyer on travel brochures. This place wasn't just a casual hangout for the Mayans, it was a powerhouse of astronomical prowess and architectural brilliance. Chichen Itza is like the Swiss Army knife of Mayan sites. It had a little bit of everything. At its heart stands the Temple of Kukulkan, also known as El Castillo, which was basically the Mayan version of a cosmic clock. During the equinoxes, the sun casts shadows on the pyramid steps that create the illusion of a serpent slithering down its side. This isn't just a neat party trick. It's a testament to the Mayans' astronomical genius and their flair for the dramatic. They didn't have CGI, but they sure knew how to put on a show. Constructed between the 9th and 12th centuries, El Castillo is a marvel of engineering. It's 30 meters tall with each of its four sides having 91 steps, adding up to 364 toss in the top platform, and you've got 365, a step for each day of the year. Talk about being ahead of the curve with your calendar innovation. This wasn't just a temple, it was an ancient GPS system, guiding not only spiritual practices, but agricultural cycles and political agendas. The Mayans built it without cranes, bulldozers, or even a single YouTube tutorial. Instead, they relied on sheer manpower, ingenuity, and a bit of divine inspiration, which probably didn't hurt. Now, let's trot over to the observatory, or El Caracal, named for its snail-like spiral staircase. This wasn't where they hosted ancient TED Talks, though it was a place of learning. Its windows are aligned with the movements of Venus, a planet that the Mayans watched with the intensity of a Netflix marathon. Venus was their cosmic BFF, crucial for timing events like wars and coronations. The Mayans didn't just track Venus out of curiosity, they believed it influenced earthly affairs. Think of it as a celestial Instagram influencer dictating the latest trends in warfare and diplomacy. The architecture of Chichen Itza was more than just aesthetically pleasing. It was a testament to the Mayans' ability to blend practical needs with cosmic beliefs. The Great Ball Court, for instance, wasn't just a sports arena. Measuring 168 meters in length, it was the largest of its kind in Mesoamerica and served as a site for the ritual ball game known as Pok ta Pok. This wasn't your average Sunday league soccer match, it was an event with religious and political significance. The court's acoustics are so precise that a whisper at one end can be heard clearly at the other. Talk about an ancient PA system with no need for batteries. But let's not romanticize this too much. For all its grandeur, Chichen Itza was also a place of sacrifice and power struggles. The sacred cenote, a natural sinkhole, was used for offerings to the gods, including human sacrifices. This wasn't just a splashy ritual, it was about appeasing the gods and maintaining the social order. The Mayans believed that the cenote was a portal to the underworld, a direct line to the divine. It's a reminder that behind the beauty and ingenuity of their architecture lay a more brutal reality, one where life and death were intimately intertwined with the cosmos. Moving along, let's visit Tikal, another gem in the Mayan architectural crown. Nestled in the jungles of modern-day Guatemala, Tikal was one of the most powerful city-states during the Classic period. Its Temple of the Great Jaguar, standing at 47 meters, dominates the skyline. This wasn't just a tomb for the great ruler Jasor Chan Kuila I. It was a testament to his power and divine right to rule. The temple's precise alignment with celestial events underscores the Mayans' knack for combining politics with astronomy. They didn't just build for utility, they built for eternity, ensuring their legacy was as enduring as the stars they worshipped. Tikal's Great Plaza was the heart of the city, a bustling hub of activity where politics, commerce, and religion converged. The stelae and altars scattered throughout the plaza served as billboards of power, chronicling the deeds of rulers and the favor of the gods. Each monument was a piece of propaganda, a stone-carved tweet from the past, declaring the might and sanctity of Tikal's kings. Yet, beneath the grandeur lurks a story of resourcefulness stretched to its limits. Despite their brilliance in architecture and astronomy, the Mayans faced ecological challenges that would make any modern urban planner break into a sweat. Tikal's population swelled to tens of thousands, straining the local resources and creating a precarious balance between prosperity and collapse. It's a classic tale of human ambition pushing the boundaries of nature, a theme as old as civilization itself. As we wander through the remnants of these mighty cities, it's clear that the Mayans were architects of both stone and stars. Their buildings were not just physical structures. They were manifestations of their cosmic worldview interwoven with their social and political fabric. The Mayans didn't just observe the heavens, they lived in harmony with them, using their celestial insights to guide every aspect of their lives. In the end, the Mayan legacy is one of brilliance and contradiction, a civilization that soared to great heights only to be brought low by the very forces they sought to harness. The architectural marvels they left behind are silent witnesses to their genius and their folly, reminders that even the most advanced societies are at the mercy of the stars and the earth. As we continue our exploration, we'll delve into how these cosmic connections influence their art and culture, shaping a civilization that, for all its flaws, remains one of history's most intriguing enigmas. Stay tuned as we unravel the next chapter in the cosmic saga of the Mayans. where the echoes of their celestial symphony continue to resonate through the ages. As we peel back the layers of the Mayan civilization, it becomes clear that their cosmic dance was as much about survival as it was spectacle. Yet, even the most magnificent stars can burn out, and the Mayans were no exception. By the time the Classic period ended around 900 CE, this once great civilization had started to crumble like a cookie left in the rain. But what caused such a vibrant society, with its celestial navigation skills honed to perfection, to collapse like a poorly constructed pyramid? Grab your popcorn, it's a saga of ecological missteps, social upheaval, and a pinch of cosmic irony. Let's start with the elephant in the room, or should I say, the drought in the jungle. The Mayans, those masters of the cosmos, might have overlooked one tiny detail, the fickle nature of the weather. While they were busy charting the heavens and timing their maize planting to the phases of Venus, their land was suffering from severe droughts. From around 800 to 950 CE, the region experienced prolonged dry spells as persistent as your uncle's conspiracy theories at Thanksgiving. These weren't just minor inconveniences, they were catastrophic. With an estimated population of up to 10 million across the region, the demand for water was higher than a cat meme's view count, and the ensuing resource scarcity was nothing short of disastrous. The Mayans had always been adept at engineering solutions, like their complex irrigation systems and reservoirs. However, these couldn't keep up with the relentless droughts. Agriculture, the backbone of their society, faltered under the strain. Starvation and resource competition can make even the most organized society unravel faster than a cheap sweater. The droughts didn't just parch the fields, they sowed seeds of dissent and chaos, leading to increased warfare and the eventual desertion of major cities like Tikal and Copan. It was as if the Mayans had all the knowledge of the stars but forgot to check the weather report. Now, let's not lay the blame entirely on Mother Nature's tantrums. The social and political structure of the Mayans was as intricate as one of their glyphs, but it was also as fragile as a soap bubble. The priest astronomers, once revered for their ability to predict celestial events, found themselves in a precarious position. When your entire society is built around the belief that the stars dictate your fate and things start going south, the finger-pointing begins. It's like blaming your GPS when you get lost, even though you miss the turn. The rulers and priestly class, once basking in divine favor, began to lose their grip as the heavens seemed to turn a blind eye to their earthly woes. The Mayans were also entangled in a web of constant warfare. As resources dwindled, city-states competed fiercely, leading to bloody conflicts and alliances as stable as a house of cards in a tornado. The rulers, desperate to maintain power, often resorted to warfare as a means of securing resources and asserting dominance. It's like trying to fix a sinking ship by drilling more holes. The resulting instability only hastened the civilization's decline as populations were displaced and cities abandoned. So, how did these astronomical practices, once the beacon of their society, contribute to their downfall? In a twist of cosmic irony, their reliance on celestial predictions might have blinded them to the very real problems on the ground. The priest astronomers, focused on the skies, might have missed the telltale signs of environmental collapse until it was too late. It's as if they were trying to solve a crossword puzzle while the house was on fire. Their inability to adapt their celestial-centric governance to the shifting realities of life on Earth may have contributed to the unraveling of their social fabric. The fall of the Mayans is a cautionary tale of how even the most advanced civilizations can be brought low by the forces of nature and the limits of their own ingenuity. Yet, despite their decline, the legacy of their astronomical achievements endures. The Mayans weren't just ancient stargazers, they were pioneers of scientific thought, their calendars and knowledge of celestial mechanics rivaling anything the ancient world had to offer. They understood the universe in a way that was revolutionary for their time, and their insights continue to captivate and inspire. Let's not forget the infamous 2012 prophecy, a meme that took the world by storm, suggesting the Mayans had predicted our imminent doom. Spoiler alert, we're still here, and the misunderstanding was more about a calendar reset than an apocalypse. It was like thinking your car's odometer hitting 100,000 miles means the car explodes. The Mayans had a cyclical view of time, and December 21st, 2012, merely marked the end of a backtune. a kind of cosmic New Year's Eve party minus the confetti and champagne. In the end, the Mayan civilization is more than just a story of rise and fall. It's a testament to human curiosity and the relentless drive to understand our place in the cosmos. Their astronomical achievements remind us of the power of observation and the quest for knowledge that still fuels our exploration of the universe today. So, next time you marvel at the night sky, remember the Mayans, who charted the stars with nothing more than their eyes and an unyielding spirit. They may not have had smartphones or space telescopes, but they had a vision that transcended the horizons of their time. In wrapping up this cosmic journey through Mayan history, we see a civilization that reached for the stars and, in doing so, crafted a legacy that continues to illuminate our understanding of history and the universe. Their story is a dance of light and shadow, science and spirituality, reminding us that while civilizations may rise and fall, the quest for knowledge is eternal. And if nothing else, they've taught us to always keep an eye on both the stars and the weather forecast, just in case.